Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Katsuki Found Strength and Healing? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanf. By the time he was 6 years old, his mother had already started to kick him out of the house. At first he was too scared to leave the yard. Instead he would spend the night in the empty doghouse in the back. It was at least dry and warm inside, and well inside the fence away from prying eyes. A cold night outside was usually enough to calm the household for a few days. Tempers quelled and annoyances forgotten. As time went on, however, his parents became increasingly unsatisfied that he would be thrown out for longer, then longer still, accompanied by dark bruises and lash marks. By the time he was 9, the beatings were a near daily occurrence, and when he annoyed her enough to get thrown out, it was for weeks at a time. And the time spent outside of the house spanned dead for weeks at a time. He learned to keep a spare school uniform in his locker. It made it much easier to slip to the showers and change. No one questioned him as long as he still went to class. Bruises and marks passed over and ignored. He was a tough kid, with strong convictions, and a loud voice, a voice that often got him into trouble, but not once had he lost to anyone in the school. No child with half a brain could ever land a hit on him, and the ones that didn't never got close enough to land a hit, and no one seemed to put 2 and 2 together though, because adults didn't expect other adults to beat on kids. His mother wasn't the only culprit anymore. Weeks on the streets led to confrontation after confrontation. Maybe he was in their territory. Maybe they were drunk. But whatever the reason, he learned quickly that adults couldn't be trusted, and some were even looking for more than a punching bag. Those ones he made sure to leave them with an extra reminder to keep their hands to themselves. Still he managed. Trained his body and quirk any chance he got, all the while keeping his grades at the very top. Only perfection would be accepted in his house, and only perfection would get him out. By 10, his parents decided he was strong enough to handle even longer beatings. Limping through the maze of alleyways, he forced his way towards neutral ground, away from the many gangs littering the area. Settling on a piece of cardboard in the unfamiliar alley, he finally gave himself a quick assessment. Bruises around both wrists and over his ribs. Nothing new there. Fractured collarbone. Uncomfortable, and he would have to put his left arm in a sling to limit the movement, but still manageable. No need for a hospital visit, at least, not like they could do anything for that kind of fracture anyway. Now his leg, that was a problem. Open wounds were the worst. Getting infected on the street was easy and deadly. This wound offered 2 problems. 1, there was still a large piece of glass in it, and 2, the cut would need stitches. Pulling the glass out was going to be a pain in the ass, and hurt just as much, but it couldn't stay in. He had the supplies to do it, but not a lot to keep it from getting infected. He didn't have enough money to go to the hospital. Nor would he want to be around when his parents were eventually called if he went. Growling to himself, he pulled his book bag close. Looked like he was going to have to do this. Using a clean sweater as a blanket, he carefully propped the meaty part of his thigh on it. He washed his hands with an alcohol wipe before taking the medical scissors and cutting away the pant leg. After seeing the bloody mess that was his leg, Katsuki began to doubt whether this was a good idea. Taking a steadying breath, he prepared to take out the glass. Once it was removed, he wouldn't have very long to stitch himself up. The blood loss would probably cause his already low blood pressure to fall, rendering him unconscious. It was a drawback to his explosions. The nitroglycerin did odd things to his body's chemical makeup. Taking a deep breath, he swiftly pulled the glass out, tossing it to the side. Before he could even register the pain, he took up the already prepared needle and got to work. Even at this fast pace, he kept his work neat, barely flinching as he impaled his own flesh. 12 stitches. More than he had thought it would take, but it was done. Working through his blurring vision, he smeared some antibiotic cream over the area and dressed it with a fresh bandage. He managed to wiggle into his last clean sweater, before propping himself up on his book bag to pass out. Defenseless on the street was not ideal, but he really had no other options. Homeless shelters were fine every now and then, but CPS was usually called when minors showed up more than once. Not to mention there were more dangerous predators that kept their eye on young men and women that went in and out of those places. He was 10, he was a prime target for quirk trafficking rings, or even just human trafficking. A quick nudge at his side jolted him awake. It took several moments for him to register the man hovering over his leg. Flinching back violently, he held up a sparking hand. "Get the fuck away from me, asshole," he sneered out. No way he could win in a physical fight in his current condition, but his quirk was still a threat. No one wanted to taste an explosion to the face. The man, though, didn't even blink. His skin was deeply tanned and wrinkled like leather. Sharp gray eyes peered over an oni mask that covered the bottom half of his face. "Calm down. You are the one sitting on my front door step, so I thought I'd offer my assistance." Sure enough, when Katsuki looked around, there was a door just to his right, well hidden and disguised to the surrounding alley. He had not noticed it at all when he had limped in here. Giving a huff, he struggled to stand. "I'll move," he grunted. Unfortunately, the movement sent a wave of dizziness through him that had him tumble back towards the pavement. Surprisingly strong hands gripped him. "Easy now. Come on, let's get you sorted." The old man chuckled. Katsuki couldn't do anything as the man manhandled him through the door into a surprisingly clean, open room. 4 futons were lining the walls, each with their own fresh bedding. An examination table was positioned near the back by a well-stocked medical cabinet with glass doors and a small swivel stool. Off the left was another room with a kitchenette and old table, to the right a door that led to a full bathroom, old and outdated, but like the main room it was clean. "What is this place?" Katsuki managed to slur out. The old man hoisted him onto the exam table, easing him back to lay down. "It's my own little clinic," the man stated. "I may be retired from medicine officially, but I couldn't abandon the people that needed me. They call me Suku." Retired? So an unlicensed doctor? Even in his current state, his mind fought to put the pieces together. The man chuckled. "People living around here don't much care whether I have a piece of paper or not. I am just here to help. I don't have any money. And I am not offering you anything else, old man." Katsuki sneered, his speech still slurred, but a little kick of adrenaline had him pushing himself back up to his elbows. The man's large hand caught his chest and gave a gentle push down. It sent a sharp jerk of agony through his fractured collarbone. Hissing in pain, Katsuki laid back reluctantly. "Most pay me back only when they can. I don't question where boxes of supplies come from, nor the money they do offer. So you encourage stealing and drug money. Honorable." Katsuki was being rude, but his own moral compass didn't like what the man was implying. The old man huffed and flicked Katsuki on the forehead. "Nothing around these parts is so black and white, brat. Look at your current predicament. I assume there is a reason you did not go to the hospital. Whatever reasons you have to be in a dirty alley in this state can't be good. So what if my medicine comes from questionable sources if it is here to help the poor and abandoned? This is a place for anyone and everyone. I do not discriminate. I will heal a mob boss, a thief, or a hero, right alongside a beggar and a child." That gave the boy pause. Everyone deserved basic medical care, not just the rich. All right, maybe the old man made a bit of sense. Suku seemed to see the change in Katsuki's view and took it as a sign he could inspect the damage. "You did this yourself?" he asked, poking around the deep gash on his thigh. "Weren't many other options?" "Well, I am impressed. You have a steady hand to be doing that kind of stitching on your own flesh." The old man shuffled around the area, grabbing an 4-bag and attaching it to a pole he pulled over. Katsuki didn't trust him completely and flinched at the appearance of the needle. "No funny business. You have my word. You have just lost a lot of blood, and this will help get you back on your feet quicker. Once this is hooked up, I'll give you a quick healing session, then you can rest." "What's your quirk?" Katsuki asked, looking away as the needle was pushed into the crook of his left arm. "Cell regeneration. It will speed up the healing process tenfold, but it relies on my own stamina to work. Being an old man limits my use of it, but a few quick sessions a day is doable. I mostly rely on old-fashioned medicines for minor injuries." Katsuki nodded and allowed the man to place one hand on his forehead, the other over his heart. Warm waves washed over his body. The pain slowly started to ebb away. Exhaustion hit him hard, he was out cold before the man even stepped away. When he woke up he was tucked into one of the futons, for still attached but almost empty. He felt like $1,000,000, better than he had in months actually. The old man was nearby but didn't offer any greeting. Once the four was removed, Katsuki took it upon himself to clean the area thoroughly and wash the bedding he had used. He might not have money, but the least he could do was take some of the workload off the man. A sharp knock on the door made the two silent companions look up. Suku stood and readjusted his mask. He shuffled to the cabinet and pulled out a second mask, this one of fire kitsune. He handed it to Katsuki. Anonymity is very important around here. No real names and no one sees our faces. It protects us and them. Katsuki took the mask and pulled it on, the fox covering the top half of his face. It was a fitting choice, he thought. Suku opened the door to a battered woman that could or could not have been a prostitute. The only questions asked were those of the medical kind. Suku directed Katsuki to grab him a couple pill bottles, which the boy was quick to accommodate. He did owe the man. Once the woman was on her way, the two studied each other carefully. If you are going to stick around, we need to get you into some clean clothes, Suku stated. What makes you think I want to hang out with you, old man? Katsuki snapped back, but made no move to leave. Really, where would he even go? Suku didn't seem to mind his rude, stubborn streak though. There are some warm clothes in that bin over there. Get changed and wash your own stuff. Afterwards, you can scrub some of the used bedding. Do I look like your damn servant? He still moved to do as he was asked, opting to leave the mask on in case any more patients showed up. For 3 years Katsuki frequented the clinic. He would show up whenever he was kicked out, do all the manual work that needed to be done, and even assisted Suku in his own work. They had an easy friendship born from mutual grumpiness. Most of their conversations involved them calling each other vulgar names and bickering. It was an eye-opening experience that taught Katsuki many things. The inner workings of the underground for one. Not to mention his way around almost any wound. He continued to hone his fighting skills and quirk, which made him a force to be reckoned with on the street, but it was balanced with his gentle and efficient client care. Kitsune, as he was known by the people, had become a permanent fixture in the clinic, respected and trusted by all the regulars. Suku would even leave the clinic in his hands for a while if he needed to run errands. Katsuki carefully color-coded his chemistry notes for easier review later on. He had to stay on top of his schoolwork if he had any hope in hell to get accepted into UA. It was still a year off, but that was no excuse. The bell rang signaling the end of the final class of the week. Katsuki took his time packing his bag before wandering down to his locker. Pretty much everyone had filed out by the time he slipped into the bathroom to change out of his uniform and into something more comfortable. He kept his uniform at school. It was easier than trying to keep track of it throughout his many street excursions. He wasn't in a rush to head home. His mother was on rampage if the string of nasty text messages sent to his phone was anything to go by. It had been a few weeks since she had last booted him out, so a blow-up was due. With all the extra training he had been doing, the strict diet, and the few inches he had grown, he was now as tall as her, with well-defined muscles. By all counts he shouldn't physically fear the woman, but over the years she too had been honing her nasty set of skills. Her words cut faster and deeper than any knife, and when she did get physical she liked to remind him that if he so much as defended himself she would have the cops there in a moment with a tale of a violent son gone crazy. Criminal charges were an instant death of his dream of UA. With that in mind he had to endure her creative punishments silently. Breathing in the warm spring air, he made sure to take a detour through the public gardens to view the newly blooming flowers. A little piece of heaven before walking into hell. Katsuki. He heard his name vibrate through the walls as soon as he stepped into the house. A long, exasperated sigh left his mouth as he kicked off his shoes at the door. What do you want, you old hag? He demanded back, long past trying to pacify her. He was going to be beat either way. Is that any way to talk to your mother, you ungrateful little shit? The voice came from the kitchen, seconds before the woman's lithe figure rounded the corner. He took the slap without complaint, simply staring back at her defiantly. Did you clean up the backyard like I told you to? She demanded. Katsuki didn't bother to open his mouth. He had in fact cleaned it, but if she was bringing it up, then it either wasn't to her standard or she was looking for an excuse. Well, too good to fucking answer me now, Katsuki? Her voice rose with each word. The second slap was a backhand, and her wedding ring left a sizable scratch across his cheek. Jesus, you old hag, what the fuck is the problem? I cleaned it yesterday. Did you? 'Cause it looks like shit. You're a pathetic little liar. Why do I put up with your bullshit? Should have aborted you sometime in the first 48 months. Maybe I could have convinced your father to try again for a girl. Abort? That's called fucking murder after 20 weeks, bitch. It's called a fucking blessing to anyone that knows you're stupid. Ass. Her face turned a deep red from yelling. Suddenly everything paused, his mother smirked and turned away. You can handle your son tonight, Masaru. Make sure he gets the point. Yes, dear. Katsuki stiffened. His mother was brutal but always quick, usually getting too annoyed to finish a beating and just kicked him out. His father was a quiet, obedient man that would do anything for his wife, which included abusing their only son for her sick pleasure. A large hand clamped over the back of Katsuki's neck. You know this wouldn't happen if you just behaved yourself, don't you, son? He said quietly as he led him down the hall towards the stairs. His bedroom door was closed behind them. Masaru pushed the young Bakugo down to his knees. Take the shirt off. And make sure I hear you count it out. He instructed as if he was talking about some menial task. Katsuki bit the inside of his cheek to keep his comments to himself. He pulled off his shirt and tossed it onto his bed. Fuck this place, fuck the old man, and fuck the hag. He would not give them the satisfaction of a single sound. A leather belt to the back would have been bad enough, but the man preferred to use the metal buckle for added damage. The improvised weapon gave a sickening thud with each swing. Katsuki did not count, nor did he scream. He stared straight ahead, his mind focused on the color-coded notes he had taken earlier that day. The only sign of distress was his tightly clenched fists in his lap. After several minutes, his father was panting with effort. The bedroom door burst inward. What is taking so long? I haven't heard any apologies yet. The man stepped back with a shrug. Sorry, dear, he is being particularly stubborn tonight. Familiar red eyes narrowed, though Katsuki did not see, his own gaze still locked forward. Manicured claws cut into his scalp as her hand fisted his hair. With surprising strength, she pulled him up to his feet. Miserable fucking bastard, her words were mumbled. I hope you rot in a ditch somewhere. Don't come back until you are good and sorry. He would have gladly left under his own will, but she gave him one last parting gift by shoving him down the stairs. His bloody body hit the floor at the bottom with a dull thud. A traitorous groan escaped his lips. He was pretty sure the fall had dislocated a couple of his fingers. There was no time to set them, though. The hag was over him before he even figured out which way was up. Her pointed heels urged him along to the door, where he just managed to grab his discarded bag and boots before he was pushed outside. The sound of the lock snapping into place marked the finale of tonight's Hell's How. Rooting through his bag, he at least found a spare t-shirt. It was cold, and the walk to the clinic would take close to an hour, but it was better than nothing. 3 fingers on his left hand were twisted all wrong. He grimaced before he even touched them. Biting into the strap of his bag, he made a point to reset them before walking off. Obvious injuries would make you look like an easy target on the streets. The alley in front of the clinic was empty as he pulled out a stash of his belongings. He donned his kitsune mask, then re-hid the spare bag with expert attention to detail. He kicked open the door to the clinic as if he owned the place. Geez, brat, looking to give an old man a heart attack? Suka growled. Luckily there were no clients, so no one else was traumatized by the sudden bang. Katsuki didn't bother responding. He moved around the place with practiced ease, the man's eyes following him with concern. Suka didn't comment as the teen set a few items in front of him, the standard disinfectants and bandages. A sad frown did form when Katsuki removed his shirt, though. Don't give me that look, Katsuki grunted. I don't need your pity. The man's gentle fingers moved skillfully over his back, making sure everything was cleaned and wrapped before giving him a few minutes of healing, just to get it all jump-started. Pity is not something I offer anyone, Suka finally commented, though I can offer my empathy. I do not wish such harm on any soul, though most don't seem to agree with my convictions. Rest now, Kitsune. Tomorrow I need you to watch the clinic. I am low on supplies. Whatever you say, old man. Katsuki stifled a yawn as he headed for his personal futon located in a small overhead room, hidden from the clients. Suku's own bed lay a few feet away. Katsuki hummed to himself as he looked over his biology assignment. So far it had been a slow day with only one regular popping in, just to offer some food she had made as a thank you. Of course he could never hope for that trend to continue, he never had such luck. He jumped, his hands sparking for a moment when the clinic door burst in. Two of the local vigilantes surged forward with a third man suspended between them. The man was obviously in rough shape. Suku. SU. Vigilante number 1 hollered. Keep you panties on, asshole, Katsuki snapped. Suku isn't here. He had to do a run. He moved swiftly to pull out the exam table before helping to ease the man onto it. It was hard to tell with the dark jumpsuit, but there seemed to be a lot of blood. When's he gonna be back? Vigilante number 2 demanded. It's not like we can just waltz into the damn ER with a pro in our grasp. We'd be arrested before we could say boo. Do I look like his damn keeper? He'll be back whenever he gets here. Now, tell me what the fuck happened so I can at least attempt to stabilize the bastard. The two shared a look before reluctantly telling him a tale of battle that made even him wince. Seems the pro in question was quite the badass, taking on a whole gang by himself. Stupid, but a badass nonetheless. Even with sustaining a deep laceration in his side, he did better than the odds would have dictated. You at least secure the fucking villains? Katsuki questioned as he washed his hands, then carefully hooked up in 4 before hauling some suture tools closer. The two gave equally indignant scoffs. Well, sorry, you little shit. We were a bit preoccupied with making sure Eraser didn't die. Katsuki clicked his tongue in annoyance. Oh really? You assholes even think to at least apply pressure to his wound so he didn't bleed out? He side-eyed them. I think you were more concerned in getting the fuck out of there instead of actually helping. You disrespectful. Look, you hero wannabes, you got him here, now fuck off. We all know you didn't bring him here on any act of goodwill. Go do whatever it is you shitstains do, I don't know, maybe check to see if the ones this guy was fighting are still there, maybe call the cops to the scene at least. The two stormed out, leaving Katsuki some quiet at least. Carefully checking the wound, he determined that there wasn't any organs hit at least. Several stitches were added before fresh white bandages were wrapped around the man's now bare torso. He didn't look like any hero Katsuki had ever seen before. Nothing about him was flashy or eye-catching. Long black hair hung around a scruffy, tired-looking face. Curious, Katsuki gave him a quick pat-down. Some police-grade zip ties, odd metallic-feeling scarf, jelly pouch, small medical kit, one phone and one wallet were all set on the nearby tray. Hero license should have your blood type on it, Katsuki mused to himself. The gods know you need a damn transfusion. Probably lost half of yours by those idiots dragging you. Sure enough, the teen found the small plastic card tucked away in the wallet. Eraserhead, or Aizawa Shoyuta, age 30, quirk, erasure, blood type B. Well, at least they had some of that on hand. Katsuki started setting up a second 4-pole for the blood as he contemplated what quirk would be called erasure. He liked to think he knew his heroes, but he had never heard of this guy. Of course, that was kind of the point when you were an underground hero. Once the man was all hooked up, he double-checked the wound before covering him in a warm blanket. The piece was broken by the vibration of the hero's cell phone. Katsuki picked it up and read the caller ID. Apparently, Eraserhead was opposed to personalized names because the name Present Mic flashed across the screen, so unoriginal. That hero was at least on the charts, so Katsuki knew a bit about him. Going with his gut, he hit the accept button. Hello, you have reached the phone of some passed-out zombie-looking fucker. Please tell me you are a responsible adult that will be by to claim his lost hero? He snarked in greeting. The voice on the other end sputtered for a moment. Who the hell is this? Where is Eraserhead? Well, from what I was able to gather from the two idiot vigilantes that brought him into my place, he thought he could take on a gang all by himself and almost succeeded. Unfortunately, he has been injured. With a promise of looking the other way of our humble establishment, I would gladly tell you where you can come get your friend. What kind of establishment? How bad is he hurt? If this is some sick joke, just know I will find you. Katsuki pinched the bridge of his nose underneath his mask. Oh God, you are hard on the head, he announced. A movement made his head jerk up, black eyes stared back at him, blinking slow. Oh look, Sleeping Beauty is awake. I am going out on a limb here, but I am guessing you want to fucking talk to him? Katsuki held the phone far from his ear as the cockatoo went off. He took the 2 steps towards the prone man and held out the phone. You feeling up to talking to this idiot? I don't recommend it if you are sporting any kind of headache. The man actually smirked. Years of practice makes you immune to his antics. He held out a shaky hand. Mike, shut up would you? There was a pause. All right, now, I appear at be in Suku's clinic. You remember where it is? The man glanced at Katsuki. Nope, no idea who the child is, but you can ask him when you get here, though I doubt you will get an answer. Once he hung up phone, Katsuki watched him inspect the wound, eye the 2 bags hanging on the poles, then turn his strangely intimidating stare on him. Where is Suku? Had some errands to run. He will probably be back before your friend arrives. He can give you a once-over, make sure I didn't give you sepsis or anything. The man did not laugh, but Katsuki couldn't contain his own smile. Fucking relax. He pointed to his own leg. I did my own years ago and it never had to be amputated, so I am sure you're fine. This time the man downright scowled at him. It was enough for Katsuki to take a step back. His bedside manner might be lacking eraser, but I assure you Kitsune is good at what he does. Suka muttered as he walked into the clinic, stooped over with several heavy bags. Katsuki came forward to relieve him of his burden. And what, exactly does a child do in a place like this? Eraser demanded. Katsuki wasn't sure why he was pissy, but it rubbed him the wrong way. Saving ungrateful asses like you, obviously. Red eyes met black in an intense stare down. Suku chuckled and swatted Katsuki's arm. Go put that stuff away, he said. Whatever. At least he walked away, though he could still hear their conversation as Suku went about double-checking his work and using some healing on the man. This really isn't the place for a child, Eraser was saying. This isn't a place for anyone really. Perfect world would see everyone with universal health care, so places like this wouldn't be needed, but here we are. The old man sighed. Besides, it is better that he is here. Being a teacher, you should know not all kids get a great childhood. I don't need you airing out my dirty laundry, old man. I'm fucking fine. You are okay, you are not fine, but that is a discussion for another day. Aizawa's eyes were back on him, studying him. He felt oddly exposed, glancing at his shirt to make sure his scars were all covered, which in hindsight was just as telling as if they were on full display. The momentary silence was interrupted by the door again bursting in. Present Mic stood there in all his flamboyant glory, causing Katsuki to snicker into his hand. Jesus, you really do look like a cockatoo, he offered. Mike scowled at him. And you must be Shuda's new secretary. So glad he hired such a sarcastic answering service. There was definitely a pout on his face as he walked to the underground hero's side. People would pay good money for my brand of fucking humor. Katsuki shouted over his shoulder as he went back to his work. He really didn't need to be stared at or interrogated anymore at this point. The heroes were still there when he finished, so he slid back to the kitchen and pulled his biology book closer. He noticed his hand were a bit slick, and it was just reflex at this point that he sparked off to clear away the nitroglycerin. Unfortunately, the sound brought all eyes to him. He stared up in shock at the tense stances. It was building up, he muttered sheepishly. If I don't burn it off, I'd fucking explode the kitchen. Still a little unsteady on his feet, Eraserhead used Mike as a crutch to walk a few feet closer. That is quite the quirk, he commented. Katsuki touched his mask to make sure it was still in place. He didn't need the man to know anything more about him. It's all right, he said slowly. Black eyes dipped to his biology book. Advanced class, he pointed out. Katsuki shifted in his chair, wishing the man would just leave. Can I expect to see you at the UA entrance exam next fall? Katsuki didn't say anything for a moment, then scowled at the man. If I did, I'd blow the rest of those extras out of the fucking water, he declared without actually answering the question. Eraserhead hummed and gave a nod before he and his partner finally exited the building. Suka looked over at him with a slight smirk. Making friends everywhere you go. Shut the fuck up, old man. 3 weeks. The hag waited for 3 weeks for him to come crawling back before she finally realized he wasn't going to do it. Instead, she sent a text telling him he had better be home after school that day or she would report him as a runaway and have the cops pick him up. It was more likely that she just wanted him home to pick up the slack on the cleaning since she detested doing anything more than maybe wiping a dish or two. School was boring. The same shit as most days, extras picking on kids that were either less fortunate or viewed as weak. In homeroom, 2 of the idiots that tried to follow him around were flexing their non-existent muscles on the annoying Greenette. Midoriya had been in his grade since they started school, but over the years they had stopped hanging out, mostly because Katsuki couldn't look after his own life, let alone worry about someone else. Still, he didn't hate the guy, he just got defensive when the other boy started in on his quirk questions, or when he stuck his nosy self into other people's business. Sitting there, doing nothing about the bullying, made him feel like an ass, but the last thing he wanted was to draw unneeded attention to himself, so like a coward he left the watery emerald eyes behind him and walked away. Sauntering down the familiar route back to his house was odd after spending so long at Suku's. The clinic had only the bare necessities, but it was more than Katsuki could ever ask for. The expensive house, with all the modern conveniences, was his living hell, and the more time he spent away from it, the more he realized just how bad his parents treated him. Annoyed with the realization, he absently kicked a bottle down the empty alley before making his way towards his destination. It was then he realized that life really didn't fucking like him. Close to 20 minutes of that sick fuck whispering in his ear, violating his body in ways that he never imagined, all while he fought for his life. His explosions damaged nearby structures, but he was far too panicked to care. Just give up, kid. No one is gonna save you. Look at that. A handful of heroes just standing there watching you. Let me in, at least I can put that quirk to proper use. More sludge pushed past his lips, catching in his throat as he gagged, attempted to throw up only to choke on that too. Tears started to stream down his face. He lifted a hand and let off another explosion. The heat burnt the skin of his cheek, but the villain snarled and pulled back long enough for him to cough out the lingering goop. One breath was all he could get before the bastard tried to force himself back in. That was when he saw those damn emerald eyes again. What the fuck was the moron doing? He didn't want him to die too. Apparently self-preservation was not in the kid's vocabulary though, because he pushed forward, frantically pulling away the sludge after throwing his book bag at the guy. It was enough of a distraction. Katsuki was able to pull in a few more lungfuls of precious air. It was the sudden explosion of yellow and blue that did the trick through. Katsuki was tossed aside, hitting the pavement with a surprised gasp. His curses caught in his throat. Everything hurt. His arms from overusing his quirk. His joints from being pushed and pulled for so long. But most of all his nose and throat. The pain was enough for him to black out for several minutes. He barely noticed the crowds rushing in to congratulate All Might, or the pros thinking it was their place to tell him he did well. Fuck the lot. He didn't need this, he was going home. No one stopped him, no one offered to walk him home, no one even suggested medical attention. At least Deku was uninjured. If the boy had have been hurt, he would have never forgave himself. He wasn't worth that price. Both of his parent cars were in the driveway. That in itself was not good. Still, he held some hope that he would be able to slink his way up to his room without being noticed. Get in here, brat. His mother bellowed from the living room, not 2 seconds after the front door opened. Seems as though they were waiting for him. WB. He raised a hand to his throat. It hurt so bad he couldn't even get a word out. Walking into the room, he saw immediately what the problem was. They were watching the news, and their front and center was him, fighting for his life. So, his mother stood up and smiled at him. There was no humor there. Big tough Katsuki couldn't even save himself from a mud puddle? His throat throbbed. The gentle attempts to massage the pain away only seemed to aggravate it more. Ignorant of his growing discomfort, she pushed her face into his and poked his chest with a sharp nail. And was that Inko's son I saw saving your pathetic ass? You have always been a disappointment, but I never thought you were a weak princess that needed to be rescued. He's quirkless, isn't he? She shoved him back. The action was barely acknowledged because he was too busy trying to breathe. The hand by his throat flinched when he felt something move under his skin. What the fuck is wrong with you? She demanded. Of all the things to happen, throwing up moving sludge and blood onto the white carpet, and onto the front of his mother was probably the worst. Seeing what was still in his body was enough to make his stomach convulse again. He fell to his knees weakly, one hand holding his throat, which was now searing in pain, the other holding his stomach. Once more his stomach empties itself, leaving only yellow bile. There was no need to look up. His mother stood stock still in front of him, mortified about what just happened but also starting to turn red in rage. "Musser, take this piece of shit to the basement. I don't want him anywhere near any of my things." Her voice was low and dangerous. "Ho's Pidal," Katsuki croaked. He normally would not have even tried to argue, but all he could taste was blood, and everything hurt so bad. His plea fell on deaf ears as he was grabbed by his hair and pulled down the hall. The stairs down into the basement were steep and not well managed in his condition. His father let him fall down the last half instead of trying to keep him upright. It had been a long time since he had been down there. His mother had always preferred to get rid of him as opposed to having him under her nose where someone might happen to see or hear him. Masaru pulled him farther into the dark, depositing him in the unfinished furnace room. Cold metal was snapped over his hands, sending him into a panic. Fuckwhy. Pain and humiliation aside, Katsuki wasn't going to break. He couldn't, because if he did now there would be no coming back from that. The cuffs kept him from using his quirk. The dirty rag shoved in his mouth followed by one tied around his head kept him from speaking. The chain wrapped around his already damaged throat had no purpose except to remind him he was nothing more than a dog to them. His father's footsteps could be heard heading back upstairs. The darkness was welcomed. He didn't want to feel like this ever again. He was kept there for 2 full days. Those 2 days were torture. He was not given anything to eat or drink. His restraints did not let him move more than a few inches in either direction. And to make it that much more humiliating, there was nowhere for him to relieve himself. The hag took a photo with her phone with a laughing sneer before having him released. "Now get out. You are not welcome back here again. You are not worth the food needed to feed you," she stated. His father pushed him out the front door, filthy, starved, and in too much pain to truly comprehend his predicament. Sock feet shuffled along the dark street. Had the way not been so ingrained in his limbs, he doubted he would have been able to get there. Arriving at the door, he found he couldn't lift his arm to knock. Instead, he slumped against the wood and sank down to the ground. Bright light made him groan and turn to his side. It took several minutes for the last few days to come back to him. When they did, he winced inward before cracking an eye. He was laying on his futon, tucked into several fluffy blankets in a clean pair of pants. The old man must have cleaned him up. Well, fuck, who needed humility anyway? His throat was still killing him, enough that he couldn't call out. Banging his fist on the floor was the best he could do to get Suka's attention. The man appeared a few moments later with water and a bowl of soup. "I healed what I could. Your throat was too severely damaged for me to fix completely. You need surgery for that. What happens if I can't get it?" His voice was low and sounded as if he had been gargling rocks. "Well, I doubt you will be yelling anytime soon, and you're probably going to have that rasp for the rest of your life. Swallowing will also be challenging too. Liquids for now, eventually solid foods just in very small bites. Could have been worse." The words hurt, but he forced them out anyway because he was not a pussy. Though the hag made it clear, "I will not be welcomed back, so, yeah, homeless." The man scoffed and held the cup out so Katsuki could take a drink. "Don't be dramatic. That place was never a home anyway. You are where you need to be. Now, hurry up and drink this before your stomach shrivels into non-existence." "Fucking pushy." He snorted, though regretted it right away. Slowly he came back around to his normal, bitchy self, but now complete with more nightmare fuel. Eventually he made it back to school. No one questioned his absence after seeing the videos of the villain attack, nor did they think to ask about the dark scarring that refused to leave his neck. It wrapped all the way around and surprisingly had nothing to do with the sludge. Fucking chains rubbed like a motherfucker. Sucking up what little dignity he had left, though, he did go out of his way to corner a certain little someone after class. The boy gave a shaky smile. Glad to see you're feeling better, Kakin. Alright, listen up, nerd, I am only going to say this once. He hated how his voice wouldn't go above a harsh whisper now. Thank you. The boy's eyes were blown wide, and he was shaking even more now. Katsuki scowled. I said I was only gonna say it once. He growled out before shoving his hands deep in his pockets. All those fucking heroes, and you were the only one to step up. It was stupid as hell, I hope your mom grounded or some shit, but I still fucking appreciate it. Midoriya gave a small laugh as he rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, she was not happy with me at all. But, you looked like you needed saving. Katsuki snorted and turned from the boy. Well, I guess I owe you one then, and Bakugo fucking Katsuki always keeps his word. He stalked off before he could catch whatever fucking feelings Deku was spewing that made him turn into waterworks. Maybe the little shit had a quirk after all, quirk name, emotional turbulence. He was tired, he couldn't think of a better fucking joke, but he gave himself points for even attempting humor at that point. At the clinic he was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the high school application form as if it had personally offended him. UA was his top choice, he would be accepted, he had no doubts about that. There was nothing but confidence in his quirk usage and in his intelligence. But that was one hefty tuition bill. His second option was a public high school. He could take some general heroic courses and try to work his way up to a pro after joining the workforce. The idea of pushing paperwork while others his age did hero work was insulting though. Groaning as loud as his throat would let him, he slammed his forehead into the table with purpose. The slight ache gave him something else to focus on for a moment. Is that any way to treat the poor table? Suku huffed as he shuffled behind him to get a cup of tea. Fuck the table. It's a ugly-ass piece of shit. At least it has enough sense not to damage itself. Katsuki glared up at the man. If this table had a brain, it would have thrown itself off an overpass years ago just to rid the world of its hideousness. Suku clicked his tongue in thought. I know a few people that should do that. Much too ugly to be allowed to live. It was dark humor, but it made Katsuki smirk anyway. Yeah, I know a few of those too. The man dropped heavily onto the chair to his left. So what has you all bothered? Don't suppose you'll be paying me to work here anytime soon? Katsuki sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. The man gave a laugh. Not unless we come across a large sum of unmarked bills. With a hum, Katsuki sat back and stared harder at the paper. It was always the goal. The only thing the hag and the doormat would have been good for was to pay for it. I don't know how I am gonna pull this. The conversation came to an abrupt halt when the front door opened, the small bell signaling the arrival of clients. Looking up through his kitsune mask, Katsuki got the impression that these were not normal clients though. Several large, armed men took up posts around the room before two more men entered. One was being held up by the other, his face pale and sweating. By the dark suits and tattoos it was highly possible they were Yakuza. Suka did not hesitate to stand and motion the men over to his table. Katsuki followed a few steps behind, eyes scanning the weapons continuously. What happened? He was hit by some quirk. He immediately started to throw up blood and collapsed. The tall, dark-haired man said smoothly as he laid his comrade down onto the bed. This was obviously the leader. The expensive pressed suit and thousands of dollars worth of jewelry were clue enough. But his sharp, intelligent eyes sealed it. With a thoughtful hum, Suku went about checking over the man. Kitsune, grab me some fluids and my stethoscope. Katsuki moved to follow the command, but came up short when the leader stepped in front of him and held up a hand to stop. Suku, the man said slowly, eyes taking in all of Katsuki. Who is this? Last I checked you ran this place alone. The old man raised an eyebrow. I'm getting old, Kenichi. Can't move like I used to. It only makes sense to have some help. I trust Kitsune with my life and I personally vouch for him. I trust you, Suku. My father trusted you. But new faces are something entirely different. His long fingers came up to pull at the base of Katsuki's mask. Katsuki acted on impulse by slapping the hand away. Last I checked this wasn't a fucking petting zoo. He snapped, his damaged voice low but clear. Guns? and quirks were leveled his way, he continued as if he didn't notice. I can either help or I can wait outside. But I don't need to stand here and be pawed at. Silence fell, broken only by the injured man's labored breathing. All right, kid. But you have my attention. Lucky me. Katsuki wasn't stupid, and he really did have some degree of self-restraint, but hovering Yakuza members with weapons, watching his every move put him on edge. Unfortunately, his defense against being put in stressful situations was to be a snarky little shit. Some might find it endearing, these men probably weren't those some. I'm not going to lie, this does not look good. Whatever that quirk was that hit him attacked his organs. He is bleeding internally. Suku quickly placed one hand on the man's forehead, one on his chest above his heart. The soft golden light danced between his fingers. He held it for a long time, longer than Katsuki had seen him do before. A moment later he sagged under his own weight. Katsuki rushed forward to help him stand. Take me to my bed, Kitsune. I need to rest. He breathed. Hook him to and for with a morphine drip. I did what I could. The only thing left is to make him comfortable to see if he will pull through. Will do, old man. After settling Suku, Katsuki walked back out to the clinic. Half the men had left to smoke outside, leaving the room less crowded, but Kenichi remained, lounging in one of the spare chairs taken from the kitchen. His dark eyes peered through heavy lids. You ever get tired of staring, Rolex? The man paused before glancing at his watch, the source of his newfound nickname. I like to be aware of my surroundings, including the people in it. It's fucking creepy. Katsuki deadpanned. Rooting through the drawers he found the morphine along with a 4-bag. He had them ready to go when he felt the presence at his right shoulder. Gonna hold my hand too? The sharp metal pushed into his back gave him pause. He glanced down at the gun before letting his eyes look up at Kenichi. They stared for a long second before Katsuki gave a shrug and went back to work placing the needle in the man's arm. The boss huffed a laugh. I am not sure if I should be impressed or concerned, kid. He admitted, though the gun didn't leave. Katsuki finished what he was doing, then turned to face the man with an unimpressed scowl. Without a word he placed his palm on the end of the gun. Do you have a death why? The condensed explosion shot down the barrel of the gun, blowing the chambered bullet out the side, blasting metal outwards, effectively destroying the weapon without even making too much of a mess. Kenichi held the gun up to his eyes, surveying the damage. Katsuki walked past him to the kitchen, putting on a kettle to make tea. There was a tense silence as the men stayed frozen, waiting for their boss's reaction. Katsuki was having a silent moment as well. Maybe he really did have a death wish because that had been a stupid move, but really, what asshole just threatened someone for hooking up and for? Deciding that, fuck them, this was his safe place, he pulled out 2 mugs and set them on the kitchen table. He chose a green tea that was said to have a calming effect. Suka had bought it specifically for him with the words, to calm the fuck down. Muttered under his breath. Carefully pouring 2 cups, Katsuki sat at his end of the table before making eye contact with Kenichi and pushing the other cup towards him. Another beat of silence. So this was how he dies, he mused as he took a careful sip of the hot beverage. The Yakuza boss tossed the weapon to one of his men before pulling his chair into the table to accept the tea. His eyes stayed on Katsuki's face as he took his own sip. You should come work for me. Unexpected, Katsuki lowered the cup. Still in school, Rolex? And Suka needs my help. Neither of those things actually pay. And by the look of those jeans and sneakers you could use a little change. He couldn't really argue that, but he would rather explode his own foot before joining a fucking Yakuza gang. Katsuki set his cup down, careful to keep his expression neutral. Really, he had played with his life enough for one day. My future plans do not include racking up a criminal record, he said slowly. Despite my colorful vocabulary and general appearance, I am not a villain. The man chuckled. Villain is such a nasty word. Most criminals are not villains, you know. That small-time thief is just trying to feed his family. That prostitute is trying to pay for collage. Those gang members are abandoned kids trying to survive. They aren't villains, they are just people down on their luck. Katsuki sipped his tea. People that made their choices. My choice is to not get involved in any of that. I am going to be a hero. A hero, huh? Problem with that asshole? He briefly wondered if there was some dark entity that secretly controlled his mouth, because he really didn't mean to antagonize the fucker farther. Fortunately, he didn't seem to take it personal. Oh. I find heroes that come from your kind of background actually do it for the right reasons. Still, hero schools cost money. He took another sip. I am a businessman, Kitsune? Was it? I own legitimate businesses all over this city. I am always on the lookout for hard workers. Katsuki was about to open his mouth to turn the bastard down again when Suku came behind him and rested a hand on his shoulder. He will think about it, Kenichi. Why don't you leave your card? What the fuck, old man? I don't need no fucking charity. Oh, not charity, you will be worked hard. But by the look of you, you're not scared of a little physical labor. Kenichi smirked. Whatever the fuck was going on was leaving Katsuki feeling confused, but he did trust Suku to help him figure it out after the gang members were gone, so he finally shut his mouth. Suku went back to the man that was still out cold on the bed. With hands on his forehead and chest respectively, Suku closed his eyes and concentrated. He frowned. He will need to rest, but I think he will make it. He can stay here for the night, or I can prep his for transport so your people can keep an eye on him. Go ahead and prep him. I have taken up enough of your precious time as it is, Suku. A shiny black car was pulled up to the end of the alley while the man was moved to a makeshift stretcher. The gang members seemed intent of covering all angles to the clinic front, so it left Katsuki and one other burly man to move the patient. When he was secured, Katsuki slid back into the clinic in time to see Kenichi handing a bundle of bills over to Suku. Your work is always appreciated. I feel I need to give you a heads up though, there is a new gang hanging around the south streets. Seem to be eyeing my territory, which would bring them to your door. I do not concern myself with the street politics. Suka huffed. No, but they might take exception to that. They have some pretty radical ideals when it comes to power and control. Just a warning, old friend. Kenichi turned and caught eyes with Katsuki. The wad of bills that was tossed to him was smaller but no less impressive. The teen snarled and shoved it back into the man's chest a little harder than necessary. I barely did shit, I don't want your fucking money, Rolex. He snapped. The boss chuckled and tossed it to Suku instead. Fine. Let it stock up the clinic then. His smirk was amused. Rare to find a teen that isn't a little swayed by money. Here is the card for a local cleanup crew. They do demolitions and clean up debris. Let my manager know I sent you. You can earn some cash to pay for that hero school. Katsuki was 2 seconds from telling him what he could do with that card when Suka slid it out of his hand to hold on to. Thank you, Kenichi. Bring your man back. If anything gets worse. The boss gave a small bow, then waltzed from the clinic, leaving a faint scent of expensive cologne and cigars. Suka sighed as he took the money to their room upstairs to tuck it safely away in a hidden wall panel. Katsuki was silent as he stripped the bed and started to disinfect everything. The offer was not brought up again until Katsuki had a supper of rice and stir-fry laid out on the table. You know, at your age no one will probably hire you. This could give you actual work experience and money to live off of. Katsuki couldn't argue with the man. He was housing him for free and feeding him. I am not going to be around forever, Kitsune, and I would like to know that you could at least support yourself if something were to happen. He paused and looked at the teen with something that could have been mistaken for concern. I doubt you would want to be placed in foster care. A strong kid like you would probably be treated pretty bad. And your old house I don't think would be wise. Katsuki abandoned his chopsticks and rubbed his hand on his pants. They were sweating and he didn't want to accidentally blow up his food. And this business, it's legit? I wouldn't be working for the Yakuza directly? The man chuckled and leaned over to tap the table to make his points. You'd be hard-pressed to find a company in this city that wasn't run by Yakuza, dirty CEOs, or corrupt politicians. It is just the reality of the world we live in. He admitted. But yes, the company is good. They clean up after villain attacks and natural disasters. You could probably get a minor quirk license to use your explosions at work provided you can pass all the safety regulations. Have you met me? I can do anything, asshole. Katsuki was actually offended the man didn't know that by now. I could make enough for school? Yes. You of course will still be here with me, so no need to spend it on an apartment or anything of the sort. In exchange for you helping me on your off hours, of course. No dirty freeloaders welcome here. Katsuki snorted a laugh, picking up his chopsticks again. Would be nice to train my quirk more. He admitted. Alright, I'll head down there tomorrow after school. What do I do when they ask for parent signature and home address? I'm gonna need that shit for the school forms too. UA doesn't let you anywhere near their entrance exam without a parent's permission. The man gave him such a dry look the teen was obligated to feel a bit offended. 14 and you can't forge your parent's signature? And you insist that you are smart. He sighed with a head shake. As for the address, I am going to give you a bit of that money Kenichi gave us. You are going to go down and buy a P.O. box and a cell phone. Use those on all your forms. I suggest you convince your middle school of the change of address too. You wouldn't want the school to send anything important to that other place. Katsuki was staring at him for a long time, trying to ignore the fact that his eyes were a bit blurry. Why? He suddenly croaked out, his throat getting quite sore from a day of snapping at gang members, obviously not from holding back tears. Why do you care? The old man reached up and pulled the mask down from the bottom half of his face, showing the abundance of old scars that crisscrossed through the stubble. Having a rough start to life does not define who we are, Kitsune, he said with a soft smile. Us throwaways need to stick together. Plus, he smiled a bit more sinisterly, who else is gonna wash my laundry for free, brat? Child labor, it is the way to go. Fuck you, old man. Katsuki used the back of his hand to wipe the dampness from his eyes. I'm just waiting for you to keel over so I can take your stuff. School, work, clinic and nightmares were put on repeat. Exhaustion was his constant state, but he pushed through, knowing it wouldn't be this hard forever. The entrance exam to UA was coming up and he was starting to feel the pressure. It was lunchtime at school and he was hunched over his hero law book, tucked behind one of the few trees on the school property. It was the only place he could go that all the damn extras didn't constantly bother him. He had just finished the chapter when some loud voices caught his attention. Deku stood a little bit away, holding his book bag to his chest. The nerd looked a bit more healthy, put on some muscle, but there still wasn't a mean bone in his body to tell the two assholes fucking with him to go sit on a pole and spin. Normally he would have looked away, but the nerd had saved his life. He owed him more than a smackdown on his current bullies. Carefully marking his place in his book, he stood up and approached the trio. He was behind Deku, so the boy didn't see him coming, but the other two did. They gave him expectant smirks that quickly turned into hesitant frowns. Deku paused at their looks before realizing their eyes were locked over his shoulder. Oh. The boy flinched back. Hello, Kaken. You fuckers don't have anything better to do? Go study or something so your dumb asses don't have to repeat your last year of middle school. He stepped around Midoriya to put himself between him and the bullies. His now quiet, rough voice somehow made him even more intimidating. The two boys scowled at him. What the hell, Bakugo? Last year you would have been right here with us putting this quirkless loser in his place. Yeah, and if last year me was here, I'd bitch slap him too. God's knows I'd fucking deserved it. Katsuki shoved his hands deep in his pockets, if only to take away the temptation to blow their asses up. Deku never did anything to you fuckers, so step off and leave him alone. I find you so much as looking at him again, I will blast you into next fucking week. You understand me? He had moved forward as he spoke, now nose to nose with the bigger of the two. The extra's thought process was written all over his face. First he was pissed, but then he hesitated, turning scared, then before he could lose too much credit, he put on a look of false bravado. Tisk, whatever. He isn't worth it anyway. You've changed, Bakugo. Katsuki didn't bother to respond, but nor did he back off. He stared at them without blinking until they scurried away like two mutts with their tails between their legs. Thanks, Kaken. That was really nice of you. Katsuki froze, he had forgotten the idiot was still behind him. Slowly he turned to side-eye the greenette. Whatever. I owe you more than that. He turned and gave the other teen a quick up and down. You been training, nerd? Yeah, actually. I have a new coach and he's been really great. Only a few more weeks till UA entrance exam. I'm actually kinda nervous. Everything I have looked up has pointed at a very physical practical and he continued. Katsuki wasn't sure why he was still standing there listening to nerd go off about the past exams, the muttering getting so fast and low that he could barely make it out. Slowly Midoriya became aware that he was still talking and that Katsuki was still staring at him. "Oh, sorry." His face flushing red. Rolling his eyes to the sky, Katsuki sighed, placed his hand on the nerd's head, giving his hair a rough ruffle. "Just don't die, okay, Deku?" He grunted before turning and walking off. "Okay, Kaken. See you later." The boy yelled after him. Fucking Suku was making him soft. That had to be it. Or maybe that sludge villain knocked something loose. After school he walked to the clinic to try and finish his homework and sleep before he had to get up at 4:30 the next day to make it to his current work site. There had been a large area affected by a villain attack that needed to be cleaned. Though by his first impression it showed more burning damage than physical damage. Which meant fucking Endeavor, the hero that had attended the call, burnt down a good chunk of a poor neighborhood. At least the flaming trash can was paying for them to clean it up. Things at the clinic had gotten busy, and since he was walking there every day, he had made it a point to hide his mask and a change of clothes farther away from the front door. So far no one had questioned the boy wearing his kitsune mask walking down a few busy streets before disappearing in the dark alley. He hadn't expected to step into a shitstorm, but that's what happened. Apparently that poor neighborhood hadn't been completely evacuated properly, and now its displaced residents were here. None of these people could afford proper medical care, which was the whole point of the clinic, but what Suku was planning on doing with all of them was a mystery. Without being asked to, Katsuki tossed his bag into the kitchen and started triaging the people. The most severe were asked to sit to the left of the room. The ones that could stand to wait but still needed serious help to the right. Without a healing quirk, Katsuki couldn't help any of them. Everyone else Katsuki took outside, with 2 large first aid kits over each shoulder. He went back in to grab the kitchen table. The ugly thing was at least sturdy, and a stack of clean linen. Setting the table up, he put the first sheet over it, set out a tray of disinfectant and his supplies. A thorough hand wash and a box of gloves, and he was ready to go. Burns, cuts, sprains, and all other minor injuries were tended to. Mild painkillers were given out like candy, and more than a few tears were shed. Katsuki slipped into the actual clinic every now and then to make sure Suku was still standing and if he needed anything. Finally, around 2 in the morning, things were cleared out. 5 of the worst patients were taking up the offered futons while everyone else had wandered off to find somewhere to sleep. Suku looked to be in rough shape, overusing his quirk by a lot. Katsuki pulled out the instant ramen, something he would normally never do, and boiled the water. Just to add some nutritional value, he added the leftover pork from last night's meal. He handed one to Suku and they settled down to eat. "I think in the morning, I am going to call in a few favor to help sort out the rest of those poor souls and the few I have downstairs," he admitted with a frown. "I still know a few top-notch medics that would help. Best if they didn't all clog up one place." "Do you want me to stay?" Katsuki asked. His job was important, but he wasn't about to abandon his mentor. "Oh, you're not playing hooky on my account, you damn delinquent. Go to work," he huffed. "Now go get a little sleep or you will die halfway through your shift. I ain't the one that looks like a walking corpse right now, old man." He snorted but still climbed the ladder into the upstairs room. He was out before his head properly settled into the pillow. No living being should have to wake up at 4:30 in the damn morning. Why did this time even exist? Fuck everything. Katsuki shuffled down towards the train station, pausing only to remove his mask at a nearby park before hoping on the first train going in the right direction. He allowed himself a short 20-minute nap before forcing himself awake to pay attention. He had to make his next stop and run to the connecting train all within 5 minutes. 6:30 he was finally rolling up on the worksite. The manager, a hulking woman with a buffalo mutation quirk, was the only one there so far. Katsuki wandered over to her side and looked over the plans. "Oh, Bakugu. Good to see you, my boy." She handed him a hard hat and a pair of specialized quirk cancellation work gloves. They were brought in special for him so that the large amount of dangerous sweat he produced didn't kill anybody. They didn't actually cancel his quirk, they just contained neutralizers to stop the sweat he made from being dangerous. Once he took them off, it was right back to business. "Got your quirk license on you?" He held up the card from his lanyard. He jumped through a lot of hoops, but those assholes at the labor board were actually impressed by his playsome control. and how well he could increase or decrease his explosion's power. Good stuff. I have you near the center of all this. No civilians in there, and most of the stuff is too messed up to be salvageable. I just want you breaking it down and hauling it out to the bin on the side street over here. Got it? Teeth, didn't realize I looked like a moron. I got it, boss lady. Won't be a problem. The intense physical labor and the constant use of his quirk had stripped his body of any fat reserves he once had, leaving only his cheeks slightly rounded with a bit of baby fat. Still, he was mistaken for a much older teen a lot of the time, which was why no one questioned him being on the construction site. It also had the misfortune of giving the others on the crew the mind that he needed to hear all their dirty jokes and sexual innuendos. Fucking extras. He had put in his best effort all day, only stopping to eat lunch when the manager gave him a scary glare. By the end of it, he was ready to pass out. Saturday nights at the clinic were usually busy too, even without the influx of displaced people, so he doubted he would be getting any rest right away. But Kogu. He heard his name and finished what he was doing. Quitting time. As he approached the manager, his strides slowed and he had to swallow back a curse when he noted the one and only Kenichi standing at her side. The man's eyes found him and narrowed in scrutiny. The hair would of course match what he had seen the night, as would the red eyes. Any moron would have put two and two together, so Katsuki wasn't surprised when the man cracked a grin. The boss didn't speak to him right away, thank the gods. Instead he held up a handful of envelopes. "Payday, my loyal employees," he announced, in a regal yet sickeningly charming kind of way. He read out the names and personally gave out the checks. Of course his had to be the last name in the pile. Bakugu Katsuki. The dark eye rose up to his, rolling the name off his tongue a few more times as Katsuki stepped forward to snare the envelope from his hands. "You always show up on payday, Rolex?" Katsuki snapped, well, more mumbled with the debris bothering his throat. "I like to make sure all my employees know they are important to me, so I try to show up at least once a month, though when I heard I had hired a foul-mouthed explosion user I had to come down to see for myself." He paused and tilted his stupid head like a stupid dog. "I admit I am a bit surprised. I didn't think you would take me up on my offer. You can go thank Suku. I was going to tell you to go fuck yourself," Katsuki stated as he started to gather up his things. "I bet you were. In fact, you probably have and will again." "Damn straight," Katsuki confirmed, only to jerk to a pause when the man put a friendly arm over his shoulder. "How do you like it so far? Tell me everything. Get off me, you nosy prick." Katsuki shrugged off the arm and faced the man properly, only to see that smug smirk. "It's fucking fine. I get to work out and train all in one place, legally, and I get paid to do it. What the fuck else is there? Not spreading yourself too thin, I hope. How are your grades?" "The fuck?" The man chuckled as Katsuki rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Mind your own business, Rolex. My grades, or anything else outside of this worksite, are none of your fucking concern." He laughed. The self-centered, egotistical fuckwad was actually laughing at him. "Katsuki, you are an angry, charming little fuck. If you ever want a change of jobs, please just let me know. I have much more interesting high-paying positions that you would be perfect for." Kenichi chuckled, wiping a tear. "Should have fucking exploded you when I had the chance." Katsuki replied, deadpan and completely serious. "Maybe." He was still smirking. "Give my regards to Suku. And Katsuki." He moved closer and his voice dropped. "Take this." It was his personal business card. "If any of mine friends from Shai Hasaikai come poking around or give Suku trouble, you let me know." At this the teen finally looked something other than annoyed. "Why would they give us problems? Suku doesn't deal in the politics, he is pretty fucking adamant about it. Everyone is welcome regardless of affiliation." The man nodded and clasped a hand onto the younger's shoulder. "True, but this crew is under a young leader that has an agenda. If he can't convince someone to join him, they usually aren't seen again. Having the old healer on his payroll would be a minor detail. The true aim is to keep him out of everyone else's hands." With that, the man gave his shoulder a squeeze and walked away. It was on Katsuki's mind all the way back to the clinic, that was thankfully empty when he arrived. He went through the motions of cleaning and cooking supper, his sour mood being brushed off by Suku as lack of sleep. Suka had been living on or around the street for the majority of this life. He knew the ins and outs better than Katsuki, so the team decided to let the old man handle it. He saved the number he had been given just in case, but otherwise put the whole conversation on the back burner. He had UA to worry about. The UA gates were tall and intimidating. Several tables sat outside, with faculty members checking off names and handing out ID badges for all the participants to gain one-day access to the campus and one of the 3 urban fight grounds in which they would be tested. Katsuki stood in the line, waiting to sign in when he turned and see a familiar face in the next line over. The nerd looks like he is gonna throw up. Big emerald eyes glanced up and gave a start in seeing him. Katsuki gave him a small nod, which got his a big smile and a wave. Fucking dead. Hopefully he keeps his promise and doesn't get himself killed. The pro-hero snipe handed him a plastic participant pass and waved him in. He internalized his fanboy moment. There were hundreds of kids wandering around the vast campus grounds. Some stood out with impressive mutation quirks. Others were very unassuming. Katsuki kept his mouth shut as he made his way to the auditorium for the rundown of the test. He didn't want to pull the attention of these extras. It was the admission committee that he needed to impress. Sliding into a seat near the back, he cast a look around. Immediately his eyes fell on 2 pros standing off to the side of the stage. The fucking cockatoo and the zombie-looking asshole. He remembered Suka saying something to sleep deprivation about being a teacher, and he had asked about the UA entrance exam. Really, he should have put 2 and 2 together. Unsurprisingly, it was the cockatoo that took his place in the middle of the stage. His voice echoing off the walls and instantaneously giving him a headache. The rules were simple enough, though he suspected the fuckers weren't telling them everything. The group was split into 3 and each given a ground to report to. Katsuki stood and made his way through the throngs of hopeful students towards the side door. A prickle at the back of his neck made him glance around. His eyes met Eraserhead's tired gaze. The man was too far away to be able to make out details, but he was sure he saw the hero straighten with possible recognition. Katsuki hated lying. His parents did that to him enough that he tried to avoid it no matter what. Yes, he used a different name and wore a mask at the clinic, but on his employment papers and everything for the school he had been truthful with his identification. Had he used an alias and they found out, they would have stripped him of any chance to become a hero. Still, it made him nervous to think the heroes now had a name and could track him back to his parents' house if they really looked. He doubted the bastards had filed a missing persons report. They really didn't give 2 shits where he was, but if a hero came by snooping, they might do it just to cover their own asses. It was something he would have to deal with at some point, he was sure. It was a fairly warm day, which was good, because the jog to ground beta was enough to get a thin layer of sweat to form over his palms. He rolled his shoulders and started to stretch out his legs when an extra in front of him tripped on something with a startled yelp. On instinct he reached out and caught the falling student, not the first extra, but the invisible bitch behind him. "You alright?" Katsuki grumbled, lifting her to her feet. He assumed it was a girl by the delicate scent of her shampoo, but he hated to guess. "I'm fine." "How did you know I was here?" she demanded. The flattening of the grass in front of her showed a foot stomp to go with that demand. Katsuki scoffed at her. "Because I'm not fucking stupid?" he growled. Suddenly he glanced in her direction. "Are you fucking naked?" she squeaked in embarrassment. Before she could add anything, he pulled out a rag from his pocket and held it out. "You're gonna want to wipe any of my sweat off your skin. That shit can cause problems." He watched the rag raise into the air and take a few swipes before being held back towards him. Pushing it back into his pocket, he glanced around at the others, subconsciously blocking the girl from being ran into. Thanks," she said softly. "I don't have access to materials that will blend with my quirk, so it's kinda embarrassing, but it's necessary if I want to do this." "I don't care, just stay far away from me. My explosions have a wide range, and the debris will be sharp and hot." "Okay, thanks for telling me." The cockatoo came over the loudspeakers. Fucker didn't even count them down, just said go. Fortunately, Katsuki was wired and was quick on the draw. He used his explosions to rocket over the crowd now fighting to get through the doors of ground beta. A quick area scan told him most of the 3-pointers were at the back of the arena. That was his first stop. Explosions lit up the area before the resounding boom shook the walls. He was careful to leave the structures undamaged. They hadn't said property damage would lose them points, but if this were real life, he wasn't going to be like the dumpster fire Endeavor and just burn whole communities to the ground for an arrest. Time and his fellow competitors were forgotten as he fell into the easy rhythm of the fight. A feral grin stretched his lips as he let loose again and again. This was amazing. When the final buzzer sounded, he landed softly on the top of one of the tallest buildings. His insides were warm and fuzzy. The soft laugh on his lips could not be contained. He had counted 77 points. He was pretty sure that would be sufficient to pass. Looking around, he saw the hordes of students, slower and more subdued now, making their way back out towards the grounds. He followed suit, touching down to the side of the people. They are gonna post the result when they send out the acceptance letters. He heard one extra saying in front of him, "I guess even if you don't place, they still let you know. I wonder what the cutoff is to be sent to general studies?" Katsuki doubted he had to worry about that. He moved away from the pack to find his book bag that he had discarded before entering the auditorium. He needed to change his shirt before he walked back to the clinic. It was drenched and he didn't feel like blowing up from a random spark. He had just peeled off his tank top when someone cleared their throat behind him. The spot was pretty secluded, so the odds of some random happening upon him were slim. Also, he had not even sensed them come up behind him, which made him think he knew who it was. Taking a moment to pull on his new shirt, ignoring the gut-wrenching feeling that the man had seen the scars on his back, Katsuki finally turned around to come face to face with sleep deprivation personified. That was an impressive showing. I did fucking say I would blow them out of the water. Katsuki sneered. He was under the assumption the man had already figured it out, and he was not wrong. Yes, you did. The man scanned his face. Have you figured out the necessary finances? Katsuki eyed him, wondering what to tell the man, and what would keep him from going to his parents if he didn't like the answers. Finally, he decided on the truth. I got a job. I should be set by the end of the fucking summer to pay everything. The man hummed as he pulled a file from the back of his jumper. It had Katsuki's name on it. The form that was pulled out had his parents' names and their forged signatures. Your parents not willing to help? Since you were with Suku, I expected to find death certificates. Not an address is a well-to-do neighborhood. He studied Katsuki for a reaction. The teen made sure to give none. Then, I figured I would find a missing person report for someone matching your description. Didn't find one of those either. My parents have a pretty hard stance on being independent. He said it wasn't a lie per se, but he wasn't about to get into his shitty home life and risk being tossed in some group home to be forgotten about until he turned 18. The man studied his face, a frown prominent. I hang out with Suku because me and my mother don't get along the best at times. Nothing to worry your exhausted head about. That got him a glare. And if I send a cop over to their address that does not match the one on your application, I might add, what are they going to find? A pissy model and a fashion designer pushover. My room is at the top of the stairs. All the basic amenities, not secret torture devices. Those where is the basement, he added to his own mind. Alright. But if I have two pissed-off parents show up at this school stating you were not given permission to attend, we are going to have a sit-down and a serious talk. Followed by an expulsion. I doubt it is in them to be pissy about anything I do that doesn't affect them directly. They'd be more mad by you showing up there because you'd be interrupting their day. The two shared a look. Katsuki knew the man was not buying his bullshit, but if Aizawa voiced that he was going to have to go straight to the cops with too little information. Finally the man gave a nod. All right, Bakugo. Have a good summer then, and I will see you at the start of term. He paused and held out his hand. Cell phone. Katsuki was about to tell him to fuck off, but as soon as one of the man's eyebrows raised, he huffed and dug through his bag for it. You're one of those fuckers that walks into the classroom and everybody shuts up instantaneously, aren't you? Katsuki muttered. He had a few of those teachers before. Strict bastards that demanded respect. But for the most part at least they were fair. Aizawa gave a non-committal grunt as he took the phone, programming two numbers into it. The first was his own that he labeled Aizawa Shoyuda, and the second was labeled Yamada Hizashi. It took the phone hitting his hand that Katsuki immediately erased the names and replaced them with Walking Dead and Cockatoo. Aizawa shook his head but spoke without cursing him out at least. If you need anything, please message one of us. Message? So if I lose an arm in a villain fight, you expect me to type that shit out? The look of utter doneness that crossed the man's face was enough to make Katsuki smirk. Aizawa turned on his heel and started to walk away without another word. Had he been able to yell, he would have spouted some snarky shit for all the nearby extras to hear, but no, he was stuck just snickering to himself. Katsuki grabbed his things and blended into the crowds to leave. He had walked about 20 minutes when he noticed the air started to become hazy with either smog or maybe smoke. Pausing, he took a tentative sniff. Definitely smoke. His pace picked up as he got closer to his side of town, the smoke getting thicker. People had to be dodged as he was in an all-out run. The kitsune mask was pulled from his bag and pulled on quickly as he burst onto the closest street to the clinic. Fights were broken out all over the place. Men in suits and plague masks stood armed on the corners of the blocks. Local vagrants were being rounded up into a small, terrified huddle, along with drug dealers and other gang members. Ignoring the violence, Katsuki had eyes for only one thing. The building the clinic was in was on fire. One thug had his head smashed back against the brick wall when he tried to grab Katsuki before he could slip into the alleyway. Moving fast, he got to the hidden door, only to have to take a step back to shield his face from the bright orange flames. Suku! It came out as a strangled whisper, Suku! Barely above a talking voice this time. There was no way he would be able to get the man's attention if he was inside. Sparking off the excess sweat, Katsuki did something stupid. He took a deep breath and shouldered his way through the burning door into the front room. Smoke filled everything, making it next to impossible to see. The heat caused the spare droplets of sweat covering his body to turn to sparks, lighting him up like a fucking Christmas tree. Ignoring the burns that started to litter his body, he moved swiftly through the place, unable to locate the old man. Upstairs was completely engulfed. If the man had been up there, he would not have made it. A beam from the ceiling fell in front of him, showering him in sparks that ignited more sweat. Unable to hold his breath any longer, Katsuki burst back out into the alleyway, gasping in still hot breaths of air. Steam rose off his body as he stood there for a moment, eyes locked on the building. Maybe the healer had got out? Was he out in the shit show on the street? In the distance he could hear sirens heading that way, but they would not reach them in time. The building was destroyed. He had to find Suku. Coming back out to the mouth of the alleyway, he quickly scanned the crowd. There were already a few bodies splayed across the pavement, people that refused to bend to the Yakuza gang in front of them. Others were being led away, for unknown purposes. Another thug slapped a hand down on Katsuki's still steaming shoulder. Without thinking, the teen turned, trapped the man's arm, and punched him to the throat before sweeping his legs to drop him onto the pavement. Another punch to the face knocked him out. Katsuki looked around, spying a fire escape to his left. He quickly jumped up to grab the edge, effortlessly pulling himself up to perch on the rail to get a better look. Suku was standing in front of a huddled group of homeless people. He looked disheveled, blood running down half of his face, and his hands were bound in front of him. He looked to be advocating for their safety to a young man with a bird mask, gloves, and short chopped brown hair. Katsuki could not yell to tell the man to watch out. Instead, he had to act. Using his explosion, he flew forward, arms outreached as he watched the Yakuza boss remove one of his gloves and reach out towards Suku's face. The explosions were not quiet, and his approach did not go unnoticed. A yellowish barrier appeared around the pair. Katsuki could not change course quick enough and crashed into it, sending him tumbling into a group of thugs. A quick explosion sent them flying as Katsuki got his feet back under him just in time to turn and see the Yakuza boss tilt his head in amusement. "And this must be your young apprentice, is it, Suku? Did you even consult him with your decision to defy me?" The man's voice was pompous and grated on Katsuki's nerves. The old man stood as tall as his old back would allow. "To defy you, Chisaki Kai, is to be human, and to know right from wrong. Your views, your ways are just evil. Even one as young as Kitsune would know that there was no other option." The old man looked at Katsuki, a small smile on his face. "I am sorry, Kitsune." Katsuki's life froze. There was no blood, no dramatic end. Chisaki had reached out, touched Suku's neck, and the light left the old man's eyes. Something fragile and innocent broke in Katsuki. It broke and left nothing but pure, hot rage in its wake. The body sunk down as a handful of thugs came rushing forward. Katsuki's eyes were locked on the scene in front of him, barely noticing anything else. Though when he did snap to attention, his eyes rose to the gold ones in front of him. He held that cold smile with a glare of his own as he almost lazily lifted an arm and blew an approaching gang member away. More explosions came fast and hot as Katsuki's sunk into his combat mode. At least there he couldn't feel the burning hole that was in his chest. The quirk was only used for small stuns, larger would have hurt the innocent, and even in his state he refused to be a murderer, at least of the innocent. The GoldenEye fuck was a different story. He relied more on his hand-to-hand training to power through the low-level gang members in his pursuit of the boss. He took several hard hits, including a knife into his upper right shoulder. The pain never came. Even when a knee was slammed into his floating ribs, the resound crack was loud enough to be heard. He felt nothing. Instead, he just reached out to grab the obstacle's shirt front and pulled him into a nasty headbutt that shattered the nose and possibly an orbital bone. Chisaki walked away at a leisurely pace, still protected by the barrier, and unconcerned for the destruction being wrought behind him. He did pause for a moment to throw an offhand comment behind him to Katsuki, who had again been knocked down but was struggling to regain his footing. "When you have calmed down, come find me. I will allow you to try and regain Suku's honor, but know if I beat you, I will make you my best soldier." The shy Hasaikai seemed to disappear back into the shadows and vacated the streets before the cop cars and fire trucks arrived. In their wake was a block of destruction and death. Several locals seemed to want to approach Katsuki as he stood there, eyes turned back to the body laying on the cold ground. They thought better of it and kept their distance. Probably for the best. Slowly Katsuki walked back. He dropped hard to his knees beside the old man, gently reaching out to turn him over and cradle his head in his lap. Bloody and bruised fingers reaching out to close the man's eyes before burying his face into Suku's old robes. The guttural roar that came from the teen was both primal and heart-wrenching. If the boy could taste nothing but copper from his torn throat after that, he was too far gone to notice. The late afternoon sun was blocked by black plumes of smoke. Police and firemen swarmed onto the scene, followed by heroes. Katsuki felt a hand on his shoulder. "You need to go, Kitsune. You will get in trouble for using your quirk. Leave Suku, we will make sure he is treated with respect." "Hurry," the woman in dirty gray rags urged. Katsuki didn't want to let him go, but knew nothing good would come from being brought in by the police. He gave a silent nod before he carefully laid the man back down, crossing the wrinkled hands on his chest. Tears started to fall as the reality sunk in. Turning quickly on his heel, he fled. A few yells came after him, but no one came close to stopping him. He ran until his legs burned, chest heaved, and the tears died up. The park that he ended up in, late that night, was cold but empty. He carefully pulled himself into one of the covered jungle gyms. His backpack was thankfully still on and relatively in one piece. A clap of thunder shook the plastic, and it was the only warning given before sheets of rain started to pour down. Some blew in through the side of the structure, but for the most part he remained dry. Being an emotional wreck aside, he knew he had to find somewhere to go. He had no food, no supplies, and was injured, with possible Yakuza and cops on his tail. Pulling out his phone, he looked at the 4 numbers that had been programmed into it. One he could never call again. That made the tears start up fresh. The other 3 stared back at him. Fuck if he was gonna call the cockatoo. Aizawa or Kenichi, hero or Yakuza. One would have to report an injured, run away to the proper authorities regardless of the circumstances. The other would probably use this to farther his argument to come work for him. Hell, it might even work with how angry he felt. Katsuki wiped his arms across his eyes and sniffled into the night. He didn't know. "Hey," came a soft but excitable voice. "You okay, man?" Katsuki's looked up. At the edge of the equipment was a boy about his age, bright engine red hair spiked to points, and teeth that rivaled a damn shark's. He was holding an umbrella, in a fucking thunderstorm, but still smiling like an idiot. There was a brief thought that he looked familiar, but it slipped away when he felt another tug on his heart which made turn from the boy abruptly. Fucking extra did not need to see him cry. It's supposed to get pretty bad out. You got someplace to go? Shitty Hair asked, crawling farther into the covered area to sit opposite Katsuki. Hey, I remember you. You were at the exam today. Explosions, right? I heard the teachers talking. They said you had the highest battle points since All Might attended you. Katsuki watched for a moment. There was no way the moron missed the soot-covered and bloody clothes or the forming bruises on his face, yet still he sat there smiling stupidly. My name is Kirishima Ijiro, what's yours? Beeb. Katsuki became acutely aware that his throat was fucking destroyed. He rose a hand to his neck as his face contorted with pain. Whoa, it's okay, man. Why don't you came over to the house? I can get you some tea with honey, and maybe we can call someone for you. Katsuki wanted to say no, but something about that stupid smile. Resigning himself to his fate, he nodded and moved towards the other boy. Together they moved across the road to a small, but warm-looking bungalow. Shitty Hair walked right in, kicking off his shoes. My moms are in the kitchen. Don't worry, they are really nice, and Mama is super good with first aid stuff. I bet she could patch you up if you want. Who the hell brings a stranger into their house and offers to patch them up? It seemed as though they were expecting him. There was a first aid kit already set out, and a towel with a fresh set of clothes off to the side. It made sense when he realized their window faced the park and they probably watched his mad run into there. Hesitating in the door, he took in the clean kitchen along with the short, plump, dark-haired woman that shared the redhead's blinding smile, shark teeth and all. And then there was the bit more stoic, taller raven-haired woman that looked professional but open. Mama, I'd like to introduce you, but I think he has a sore throat. He was at the UA entrance exam this morning though. Got a ridiculously high score according to the teachers. It is a pleasure to meet you. Can I make you a cup of tea? The taller woman offered. Katsuki was at his emotional and physical limits, so he just nodded and let Kirishima lead him to a chair to sit. The shorter woman clicked her tongue as she looked him over. Oh sweetheart, you are filthy. You weren't in those fires across town, were you? Katsuki looked away from her, neither confirming or denying, but she didn't seem to mind. Well, you can grab a shower once you've had your tea. After that I'll patch you right up. Reluctantly he gave a nod. The silence did not last long though. Shitty Hair filled it with a full tangent about the exam, and how he felt it was definitely geared to physical quirks like theirs and wasn't fair to some of the kids that had mind quirks or the like. When he ran out of that, he chatted happily about anything and everything. Katsuki watched him, mildly impressed. He had talked for a solid 10 minutes and hadn't annoyed him to such a degree he was ready to blow himself up. The tea did help his throat feel a little better, but he still couldn't get it to work for him, so he made do with pulling out a piece of paper and pen to write out his name. It felt weird to be in these people's house if they didn't at least know what to call him. Come on Baku bro, I'll show you where you can get cleaned up. Baku bro? What the fuck was that? Okay, if he wasn't so fucked up at the moment, that would have warranted at least a small explosion to the face. The shower did the job. He waited till the water went from black and red to clear before he stepped out and dried off. The offered clothes were a bit baggy, but the simple t-shirt and sweatpants were clean and warm. As soon as he stepped out of the bathroom, he was affronted by the Labrador puppy of a boy. Here, let me take those. I will throw them in the wash for you. He smiled and took the dirty clothes from Katsuki. Off he went, happy as could be, while Katsuki stood there, stunned at the ease of which these people accepted someone. Back in the kitchen, the shorter of the women brought him over to a stool, where the taller woman was waiting with antiseptic wipes and bandages. The woman offered him a small smile. Are you okay if I touch you? She asked. No one had ever asked that before. He gives her a hesitant nod. She starts with the cut on his forehead and works her way down. The deep stab wound in his shoulder makes her flinch, but she cleans it and pins it together with some butterfly band-aids. Another cup of tea was pressed into his hand when Kirishima returned. The boy just offered a 100-watt smile to his confused expression. There we go. Anything else hurt? Katsuki sighed. Might as well get ice pack for his ribs. He had already inconvenienced them. What was one more thing? He lifted his shirt to expose the nasty black bruise that crept over his entire side, down to his hip bone. Ouch. Shitty hair sympathized. A gel ice pack was offered to him without complaint. Thankfully, Katsuki managed to get out. Oh, now, none of that. You rest your voice. By the scarring, I take it that is an older injury? The smoke probably aggravated it. The tall woman offered. It is pretty late, how about we get you a bed made up on the couch? Is there anyone you want us to contact for you tonight? Katsuki shook his head no. Okay, hun, we will talk in the morning. The woman hugged him. Both women hugged him. Then Shitty Hair grabbed his hand and pulled him towards the living room before grabbing a stack of blankets. What the fuck was up with this touchy-feely shit? Oh no. He knew another family exactly like this. Fucking Deku and his mom. They were all about the touching and sharing of feelings. And fucking crying together. Oh, by the gods, did he find another Midoriya? Under intense scrutiny, Kirishima only smiled and offered one last pillow. My room is the first one on the right. If you need anything, feel free to come grab me, Bakubro. Then he turned and left. Okay, not like Midoriya, that nerd would have insisted on them staying in the same room, probably the same fucking bed. Katsuki ignored that burning hole for the moment, carefully making a suitable bed as the Kirishima household made their way to their rooms. Finding a plug close to his head, he plugged in his phone and laid down. He fell asleep staring at the two numbers he needed to pick from. Katsuki awoke around 5 the next morning. He laid there for a long time, refusing to open his eyes. He hoped it was a fucking dream. He was going to open his eyes and he was going to be on his futon above the clinic. It was a long shot, but he held on to it as long as he could. Around 6 he decided that he needed to get up. He carefully folded all the blankets and placed them in a neat pile at the end of the sofa before wandering over to find the laundry, where his clothes were sitting in the dryer. One of the women must have switched it over. He was dressed quick and had his hand on the doorknob to leave by 6:15. A creak of a floorboard made him pause. Heading out already, Bakubro? Katsuki glanced back at him. The boy was smiling again. Yeah, Katsuki huffed, his voice returning just enough for the other to hear him. I got somewhere to stay, I don't want to impose. Tell your moms thank you for me? Sure thing, Bakugu. Hey. His hand touched his arm, making Katsuki relax into the touch just a little. Can I at least get you number? We can hang out for the summer. I'm sure we will be both in the heroics class come September anyway. If he hesitated, it was only because he was distracted by those white fucking teeth. You know, if you want. Shitty Hair added, sounding a bit more unsure. Katsuki pulled out his phone and looked at the boy expectantly. Kirishima perked up again and rhymed off his number. After adding it, Katsuki sent a quick text that included a gif of a shark with dentures. The laugh was enough to make that fresh, burning hole dim just a little. Leaving the house was hard, but it had to be done. Visiting was one thing, and he hoped he could do that again, but imposing on their goodwill was something he refused to do. Pulling out the phone, he noted Kiri sent him a text back with a cactus that had angry eyebrows animated over top of it. Sassy shithead. He decided he was going to send 2 texts. The first was to Aizawa. Walking Dead, Bakugu? I am combing the goddamn streets for you. Please tell me you are alright? I saw the clinic. Bakugu, I am fine. Suku is dead. Walking Dead, yes, I saw that too. A proper wake and cremation are being planned. I can forward you the times and places. Big, please do. Walking Dead, are you safe? Did you go home? Bakugu, I am safe. I have a place I am going to stay at. Not home. Walking Dead. Bakugu, were any of those fucker arrested? Walking Dead, a few low-level thugs, but none of them are talking. Do you know something? Bakugu, know something? I smashed a few of them myself. Watched the creepy fucker in the bird mash kill Suku. One fucking touch. Suku called him Chisaki Kai. Katsuki switched off from that conversation. He was getting himself worked up. He switched over to another window. Bakugu, I need a pickup. Can you do it? Boix, who is this? Bakugu, Kitsune. Can you pick me up? Yeah, kid, I can come. Where are you at? Katsuki sent the address of the closest store. Tucking the phone away, he pulled up the hood of his sweater and waited in front of the store. A few early salary men went in and out, but otherwise the street was quiet and nobody bothered him. The sky was still rolling with dark gray clouds, threatening to split open at any moment, but at least it was warmer than it had been last night. Eventually a sleek black sports car, that definitely did not belong in this neighborhood, pulled up. Katsuki waited for the passenger side window to roll down and he saw Kenichi's face before moving to get in. The leather seats were soft and heated and Katsuki almost melted back into it. His injuries and sore muscles from quirk overusage made themselves known with a vengeance. Kenichi pulled away and they drove in silence for a couple minutes before he spoke. "How are you holding up, kid?" "Fucking peachy." The man only nodded, not at all offended by the tone. "Do you need a place stay?" Katsuki played with the hem of his shirt for a moment before sighing. "Yes. I'd stay on the street, but I can't afford to be picked up by CPS, cops, or now those fuckers from Shai Hasaikai. Just for a few days? You can stay as long as you need, Kat. Suku was a long-time friend of my family. It would only be right for us to help one of his." The man fell silent for a long moment. Katsuki knew what was coming, but he wished he wouldn't. "I watched the security footage from a couple of my stores down there. You did good, kid. There was nothing else you could have done. That was it. Fucking Yakuza boss making him fucking feel it all over again." His tears fell silently, and his chest felt like it was going to burst apart, so he wrapped his arms around himself to try and keep it together as his shoulders shook. He didn't know what he was expecting, but a fucking mansion, wasn't it? Traditional Japanese-style home that was spread over a large plot of land. Carefully trimmed bushes, along with beautiful water and rock aesthetics, dotted the property, as well as a small carved bench set at the edge of a massive koi pond, filled with blooming lilies and fat goldfish. Katsuki stepped out of the car, eyes roaming the grounds. A few guards stood at the gates and a few more walked the grounds with dogs. Still, their presence didn't take away from the clean architecture. Touching his bag, he wondered if he should be putting on the kitsune mask. "You are safe here, you don't need to hide." Katsuki didn't trust him completely, but he couldn't think of a reason to don the mask here. The thought of wearing it actually made his stomach crawl. It was still coated in the soot and grim of the fire. Feeling a bit like a lost puppy, he followed Kenichi into the house, following the man's example by leaving his shoes at the door and sliding on a pair of house slippers. "I'll take you to one of our spare rooms. You can drop off your stuff, then I will give you a tour." Katsuki nodded, aware his eyes were still red and puffy from his mental breakdown in the car. There were more men in the main house, so there were more eyes on him. It was enough of an initiative for him to straighten his back and rise his chin. Kenichi glanced over his shoulder at him, offering a small smile. "Or I can leave you to rest?" "No, I don't want to be left with these fucking thoughts," Katsuki admitted, tapping his temple. Kenichi seemed to understand. Death of friends and family does not get any easier, and contrary to what people tell you, time does not heal it, it just numbs it a bit. Death is natural, it will happen to everyone, that isn't the problem. Whatever that was far from fucking natural. The asshole smiled and just touched Suku. One touch and all his energy, his life just fucking vanished. Tears threatened to fall again, but he fought them back with sheer force of will. No man who dedicated his life to healing deserved to be snuffed out at some fuckwad's childish whim. You are not wrong. Unfortunately, in this line of work, power plays like what happened on that block rarely come without a price. Innocents die all the time. So, you assholes just get to play with people's fucking lives because what? You like to flex your muscles? You'd have no problem walking up to a bound old man, no threat to you, and just ghost him? Kenichi stood still, eyes locked on Katsuki with a surprising amount of patience. "I don't want you to have any false ideas about me, Kat. I have killed people, a lot of people, either by my hand alone or by my orders. I am sure some were civilians caught in a bad place, but it happened. Do I get any joy out of it? It is not pleasant, I do not enjoy it." He took a step closer, his aura giving Katsuki enough reason to take a step back. "I have done horrible things, but I try to have honor and some morals when I do it. Chisaki has neither." Katsuki could feel his throat pull with the force of the words. "And I will withhold my fucking judgment on you." "Fair enough, kid." The rest of the tour went by with little fanfare. After a long soak in the tub, Katsuki made his way to his room, which was decked out in all Western-style furniture in a Japanese-style room. The teen thought it should look stupid, but as soon as he climbed into the pillow-like bed, cocooned in fluffy blankets and pillows, he couldn't hate it. He had slept okay at the Kirishima household, but here he passed out and did not move again until late the following day. It was another day before he ventured back out of the room. He had traded some texts with Shitty Hair and Aizawa, but other than that he allowed himself to grieve and wallow in a small degree of angst. On the third day he knew he had to leave to get food. His body was deprived to the point his head hurt. The house was big, but his memory was good, so around 5:30 in the morning he found himself wandering down to the kitchens. He had never laid eyes on so much food or variety of cooking appliances in his life. He had been cooking for himself since he was little, so he knew his way around. Fresh vegetables and eggs were pulled from the fridge along with rice. Soon the place was filled a combination of delicious smells. It was early, so he hadn't really expected anyone to be up and around, but he still made a second plate just in case. As well as putting on a pot of coffee. Settling in at the table, legs tucked neatly under him, he dug in. Despite how hungry he was, he forced himself to slow down and not get sick with 2 big bites. He was about halfway through the food when Kenichi strolled in. The man was sporting freshly pressed trousers and dress shirt, topped by a deep green corset vest and shined shoes. The man pulled a black coffee mug out and started to pour. "So, you wear that shit in your own house too?" Katsuki grumbled, eyeing the suit-vest combo. "Gotta look good no matter where I am." Kenichi flashed him a toothy grin. "You look like a douche. Like those fuckers that think it's cool to wear sunglasses inside." Kenichi paused in the pouring of his coffee to raise an eyebrow at Katsuki. Katsuki met his stare and held it even as he lifted his next bite of omelette to his mouth. "Fucking brat." Kenichi mumbled before topping off the mug. "Suka said that a lot too," Katsuki offered. "I'm thinking you guys just don't like hearing the truth." "Suka must have had the patience of a saint to put up with your ass," says the man who is letting me stay in his house. Talking about Suku in this way was surprisingly not painful. Instead it reminded him of good memories, not those horrible last moments that had been haunting his dreams the last 2 nights. "I called your work, you have the next week off." Kenichi changed the subject smoothly, while Katsuki got up to grab the other plate and dropped it in front of him. "Well, you are the fucking boss." Yes, I am." Kenichi agreed, getting his smile back. "You know, I didn't get to show you when you came, but we do have a massive, quirk-proof training gym in the basement. Feel up to some sparring?" To those magic fucking words, Katsuki lit up like a kid on Christmas. Fighting was a good way to work out all of his shitty feelings. Quirk-proof didn't mean explosion-proof apparently. Katsuki winced as he looked at the massive crater he had made in the back wall. The poor bastard in the middle of it staggered to the side, only half conscious and his quirk shield shattered. He said he was able to absorb any hit. Katsuki muttered in his defense. Kenichi and the handful of men with him were staring at the damage dumbfounded. After several moments of silence, the boss ran a hand through his hair and glanced over at Katsuki. "What percentage do you say you just used on that explosion?" he asked, curious not mad. Katsuki flexed his fingers. "Probably around 60%. I have ways besides just upping my power to attack too. I have been working on concentrated explosions for long distance and a shockwave that blinds but doesn't do damage. I am also getting pretty good at propulsion and maintaining aerial combat." "What the fuck?" one of the extras mumbled, shifting nervously. The others seemed to share the man's feelings towards the grossly overpowered teen. "Well..." Kenichi rubbed his neck again, thinking. "How's your hand-to-hand? And weapons?" Katsuki shrugged. "Average. I'll admit I rely on my quirk. Way too much during fights." "Can you use your quirk for one-on-one combat? Increase punch speed, explosions on contact, that sort of thing?" "I haven't tried. Not too many volunteers that wanted to spar with me, especially not with my quirk." "Alright, you and me are going to go a few rounds. You can use your quirk, but I'm going to use mine too. And don't worry about hurting me, go all out." Katsuki eyed him with some reservation. He was still injured and 1 meal in a couple days was not near enough. The man was taller than him, but thinner. He held some muscle mass from what Katsuki could tell, but nothing that really stood out. "What is your quirk?" Katsuki asked out loud. The man hummed and chose not to reply. He did remove his vest and shirt though. In nothing but his pants and a black undershirt, Katsuki could see the winding tattoos that covered everything from his collarbone down to his wrists. Taking his fighting stance, the man took position opposite him. No bell was needed. Katsuki attacked. He would rather fight and find out what the man could do than sit back and worry about it. Kenichi moved like water. Whatever martial art he was using, he was clearly proficient in it. All kind of kicks, punches, sweeps and ridge hands were blocked and turned away smoothly, but he made no effort to strike back. Katsuki wasn't dumb. Getting frustration would only make him sloppy, so instead he took the man's advice and added his quirk to speed things up and add some oomph to the strikes. Of course Kenichi expected this. What he did not expect was for Katsuki to be a very fast learner. It only took about 7 minutes of sparring before Katsuki started adding the boss's moves to his own attacks and landed his first solid punch to the man's solar plexus. The man fell back with a soft oof. Katsuki didn't give him a second to breath. He pushed the attack, landing a couple more strike but taking his first few as well. The pressure was enough that Kenichi cast him a smirk. What the fuck do you do when a real-life, solid fucking dragon pops off a man's arm and flies at your face? You fuck it up, of course. As much as the move surprised him, Katsuki kept his head enough to blast it with a small explosion. Unfortunately, the thing seemed to absorb the power and got bigger. Then a second beast peeled from the man's torso. This one was a demon of sorts with blank eyes and horns. It was only small, but when it took a hit from Katsuki's quirk it grew too. Now Katsuki found himself fighting on 3 fronts. With 2 sides he was unable to blow up. With that in mind, he focused his attacks on the man in front of him. He held his own for 15 minutes before it became too much and Kenichi was able to overwhelm him. Katsuki hit the ground hard, knee pressed against his chest, forearm over his throat and his other hand pinned. Katsuki tapped the floor with his finger a couple times. Kenichi got off him and offered a hand to help him up. The teen scoffed at him and flipped up to his feet with practiced ease, not showing the wave of dizziness he felt. "I thought you said average?" Kenichi demanded. "I lost. That was fucking average. No one has ever stood with me for that long, especially after I employed my quirk." Katsuki shrugged, not sure how to take that comment. The mention of the man's quirk caught his attention though. "So what is the deal? Is the ink the quirk, or is it just a manifestation of what your quirk looks like?" He moved forward, studying the patterns. "Can they all be used or just those 2? Those are a whole lot questions that border on personal, kiddo. I don't like people knowing all my tricks." Katsuki scoffed and folded his arms. "If you're any fucking good, it shouldn't matter who knows it." The men couldn't hold back the snickers. A few even walked away covering their mouths. Kenichi scowled a bit. "You do remember who was just pinned to the floor, right? Did you forget so soon? It won't happen again, Tinkle Toes. I've seen your moves now." The routine around the mansion was easy to fall into, and Kenichi wasn't strict with any rules with the exception he expected Katsuki to tell him when he left. Getting a little antsy, he decided that today was the day he would take a walk. The mansion was quite a ways from the old neighborhood, but navigating the trains he got there within an hour. The streets were empty, everything had been cleaned up and swept. Out of habit, Katsuki slid his book bag behind a big dumpster and pulled out the kitsune mask. He hadn't bothered to clean it. The white ears were scorched at the tops, the rest was gray with soot, and a dent was in the forehead where he had head-butted one of the thugs. With a mixture of intense feelings, he slipped it on and wandered the familiar routes, all leading him back to where the clinic should have been. The building was still standing, which was a surprise, but it was gutted. The inside was black and hollow, showing nothing from its former life as a place for the sick and forgotten. Katsuki kneeled and touched the scorched black floor, almost as a goodbye. Turning, he headed for the square. Few people remained even here. Having been a target of such a large-scale attack, they though better than hanging around. Homeless people were survival-driven if nothing else, and dangerous areas were often avoided. Sitting on one of the nearby buildings, Katsuki let his feet dangle over the edge as he watched the sun dip below the horizon. His mask was laying beside him, reminding him who he was and keeping him grounded enough that he didn't do anything stupid, be it to himself or going on an ill-thought-out rampage against the shy Hasaikai. He nearly jumped out of his skin when a hand touched his shoulder. "Would you buy a fucking bell so you don't startle people?" He growled at the tall figure of Eraserhead. The man cocked his head to the side slightly. "Defeats the purpose of stealth. Perhaps you should work on your situational awareness." The man deadpanned. "Fuck you, Walking Dead," though it was lacking its normal bite. Katsuki looked back out over the streets, pulling a knee up to rest his chin on it. The wake is tomorrow, funeral the day after. Suku has many friends that are helping put it all together, but his sister is leading the efforts. She has asked that you sit with her for all the proceedings, and to help at the cremation. That startled his. He looked over at the man, searching for the joke, but Aizawa's face was as unreadable as ever. "Why?" Katsuki had to ask, his voice crackling, sending him into a coughing fit that ended with blood on his hand. Aizawa stared at it with open concern and even raised an eyebrow. "He viewed you as family, even wrote you into his will, though he didn't have much to leave you." Aizawa pointed at the blood. "What is that from?" "Had a major injury a few months back, should have got surgery to fix it, but..." He gave a shrug, yelling too loud, and the smoke inhalation seems to have made it worse. "Nothing serious, just sore. And bleeding." The man snared his upper arm and lifted him to his feet. "Come on, you are getting that looked at." Katsuki panicked and tried to pull his arm free, but the man was surprisingly strong. "No. I won't go to a fucking hospital. Let me go." With a sigh, the man held Katsuki firm. "Then I won't take you to a hospital, but that still needs to be looked at. Come on. We are heading to UA." Katsuki was hesitant, but he was not being given any other choice. "Besides, you can speak to Suku's sister before tomorrow. I doubt you have been to many funerals at your age, and she would appreciate another soul to mourn with." Keeping up with Eraserhead over the roofs of building and through the streets was hard without his quirk. In fact, Katsuki was sure he would have been struggling even with his quirk, watching how fast the man moved with his capture weapon. Even struggling as he was, Katsuki got there just behind him, heaving heavy breaths that tightened his throat farther. When he saw the underground hero watching him carefully, he realized he was testing him, seeing how bad the injury really was. There was no way he was going to let the man know that copper was the only thing he could taste. Tilting his chin in defiance, Katsuki waited. Aizawa was not so easily swayed. He simply shook his head and motioned his to enter the gates. There was a tinge of excitement as he got to look through the school, absently following the pro-hero. Classrooms, gyms, the cafeteria. Pretty mundane, honestly, but he had been dreaming about going there since he was fucking 6. Clearly not paying attention, he bumped into Aizawa when he stopped in front of infirmary doors. The man knocked, sparing Katsuki only a brief look. "Come in." Old people voice. The person on the other side of this door was bound to be a raisin. As they entered, Katsuki gave himself a mental checkmark. Old person. The woman was short, not even hitting 120 centimeters. Her hair was pulled up into a tight gray bun, held together by a clip that resembled a syringe. But maybe not as much as the cane that was also a massive syringe. Geez, did these people never change out of their hero outfits? Hello Aizawa. What bring you in here, on summer break, and with an injured student? Couldn't wait till the school was at least open before flooding me with your teenager's stupidity? She scolded him, and Katsuki popped a grin at her feistiness. Recovery girl, this is Bakugu Katsuki, this is Shizenji Chio aka Recovery girl. Suku's little sister? Oh. Katsuki and the short woman stared at each other. He didn't know what to say, but he knew what any family of Suku's deserved from him. Katsuki dropped to his knees and touched his forehead to the floor. "I am sorry for your loss, and I am so sorry I couldn't save him. I swear I tried, I just wasn't good enough." Both adults shared an uneasy look. Katsuki felt a sharp smack on the top of his head. Recovery girl stood over him with her cane outstretched. "Get up, boy. None of that now. You are not responsible for anything that happened, and from what my brother had said about you, you are as good as a grandson to him. So get up and sit on the table so I can get a good look at you. We can discuss everything else once you are feeling better." Katsuki did as he was told, even without a smart-ass comment. He didn't look either adults in the eye for several minutes. Shirt off, dear. I need to see all injuries so I know how much stamina you'll be using. Resigned to the fact his life was just full of uncomfortable moments, Katsuki peeled his shirt off, still avoiding the looks. On top of the scars, his side was still a dark blob surrounded by some sickly yellow. New bruises dotted his upper arms and wrists from sparring with Kenichi, and there on his shoulder was the stab wound. A wound the Aizawa was quick to pick up on. Were you stabbed? He breathed out as he pinched the bridge of his nose. He didn't wait for a reply. I thought you told me you were fine? It wasn't a yell, but the slight influx of his voice was enough to have Katsuki lean back from him. It wasn't a logical response, more of reflex, to be far away from a pissed-off adult. At home it would have meant a beating. Not dead, hence, fine. Katsuki explained, only to get glared at, and he promptly shut his mouth with a click. What was with this guy and why did he have this authority about him? Stabbed is not fine. And if you bring that self-sacrificing crap into my classroom, I will expel you. Yes, sir. He added, unsure but of any adult male that he knew the fucking title fit. Hell, he didn't even curse. Aizawa seemed to be taken back, eyes narrowed in suspicion. Check his throat, Tuchio, he coughed up blood earlier. Walking Dead coming in with the old one too under the bus. Katsuki wasn't surprised the man didn't forget. In fact, he would have been surprised if the man did. Open. There was a long moment of silence as a light was shone down his throat and the woman got right in his face. It was uncomfortable, but he tried his best to keep calm. My, that is in rough shape. I can heal it, but you should consider surgery to fix it properly. There's a lot of scar tissue. She paused and looked down at him. What was the original cause of this? She was gracious enough to remove her hands from his mouth for him to answer. Sludge villain attack at the first of the year. Was never checked out afterwards, and by the time Suku could look at it he couldn't heal it properly. The name made her smile sadly. The rest of the sentence seemed to mark the vein on sleep deprivation's head throb visibly. Sludge villain, you say? The one that All Might arrested? Yes? Katsuki looked at him with a confused furrow of his brow. And no one thought to take you to the hospital or let the paramedics check you over? It throbbed at an increased rate now, in perfect rhythm to one of those catchy pop songs. Katsuki suddenly smirked. You know what? I changed my fucking mind. I would pay for you to show up at my mother's house with those questions. Hell, you might even be able to get her to fucking listen for 5 minutes. It was a joke, but since the adults were looking at each other again, they were able to pick out some deeper meanings there. He shrugged to himself and glanced around the nurse's office, impressed with the high-grade equipment and abundance of supplies. He was not prepared for lips to touch his forehead. He flinched back, but it was already done. Waves of exhaustion hit him, but all the pains slowly disappeared too. She offered his a hard-boiled candy which he took with a yawn. Would you like to sleep here? She asked, then we can talk in the morning. No, I should get back before my friend starts to worry. I'm okay for a bit if you want to know anything about Suka though. A soft smile graced her thin, wrinkled lips before she pulled up a chair. She spoke of their childhood, his years as an actual doctor and his eventual forced retirement. The two had a bit of a falling out afterwards but had grown close again the last few years. It seemed Recovery Girl was why her brother always had access to the 4 bags and blood bags at the clinic since those were hard to come by on the street. Finally she spoke of Katsuki and what Suku had told her about him. Katsuki didn't talk the entire time the woman spoke, nor could he find it in his heart to argue with her about how the man felt towards him. Grandson had not been an exaggeration according to her. The last thing they spoke about before Katsuki had to leave was what would happen over the next 3 days. You really want me to sit with you in the family section? That was new. His family would rather him be in the box. Yes. You and I are his family and I would be honored for you to join me. Do you have a suit? I can get one for you. Oh. It's fine. I happen to know a overdressed pompous asshole that wears nothing but suits. I am sure he will loan me one. I can pick you up. Aizawa offered. The idea of the underground hero showing up at the Yakuza manor was laughable. Nope, scratch that, it was terrifying. Those two meeting would be like two unyielding forces. Colliding. He did not want to even think about that. Oh, I'm good. Where are you staying? With a friend. The two locked stairs, but Katsuki refused to relent. That was something he would be keeping to himself. Eventually the man relented and let him go. It was late by the time Katsuki made it back to the mansion. The guards greeted him warmly as he walked in. Having no time to waste on pleasantries or small talk, he marched to Kenichi's personal room and pounded on the door. He heard some shuffling inside, and a couple voices before the man pulled open the door. He was wrapped in a very feminine, green bathrobe, which was mostly open, exposing his bare chest and legs. Katsuki kept his eyes locked on Kenichi's. Sorry to interrupt. Whatever the fuck this is. He waved towards the three naked women lounging on the man's bed. But I really can't wait the 5 minutes you need to finish. The women giggled behind their hands. 5 minutes? Come on, Kats, give me a little credit here. He grinned and winked, and Katsuki held back his gag reflex. I need a suit for Suku's wake tomorrow, and the fucking funeral. I was in contact with his sister and she would like for me to sit with her. A suit, you say? That was all the invitation Rolex seemed to need. He grabbed Katsuki's arm and pulled him into his room, closing the door behind him. Modesty apparently not a thing here, because the man didn't bother putting anything else on, nor did the three women. Keeping his eyes respectfully to the ceiling, several suits were pulled out for consideration, the women putting in their 2 cents as well, before Kenichi finally decided on a full black suit, with a black-on-black floral corset vest, and high-neck dress shirt, to eliminate the need for a tie. He held it up before Katsuki and directed his sight to the mirror. It looked good, and probably cost as much as a fucking car. Yes. This should be perfect. The jacket was always a bit wide on my shoulders, so it should fit you fine. What do you think, ladies? Will he be presentable? They hummed their agreements with smiles, one muttering under her breath, I do him. Ushering him towards the door, Kenichi gave his shoulder a squeeze. Get some rest, Kats. I'll be coming to the wake tomorrow as well, I'll drive you. Pushed out the door a little more forcefully than necessary, Katsuki rolled his eyes. He quick-stepped it back to his room so as not to hear the sudden bout of giggles coming from the man's bedroom. The whole proceedings were a sad and long affair. The somber mood was shared by the dozens and dozens of people that filled the temple. Suku was well loved. His patients, old co-workers and friends all filed in to pay their respects and offer their condolences to Chiyo, and oddly enough to him. Even though he was not wearing his signature kitsune mask, the majority of the people that came through called him by the name and hugged him as if they knew, which they did of course. Why else would he be standing there? The next day was the funeral, which held a lot more formalities. He was glad Recovery Girl was beside him to help, because he didn't know what he was supposed to be doing half the time. The other half he found himself comforting the woman, holding her hand and helping her to her feet when she had to stand. The final day was the cremation. He and Chiyo quietly used large wooden chopsticks to carefully place Suku's bones into the urn, starting with the feet. His mind wandered as they worked, remembering good stuff and the bad. He would not cry, he wanted to be strong for Chiyo, but the proceedings definitely felt like a final step. Hours later, Katsuki found himself sitting on the steps of an abandoned building, having left the Shizenji family tomb only an hour ago. He needed to move, but his limbs felt frozen. Okay, old man, he said as he looked towards the stars, a few managing to peek through the light pollution from the city. I promise those fuckers will pay, but I am not going to be stupid about it. I bet I can get more intel on them helping people on the streets than the cops ever could. I also promise to help Chiyo with anything she needs. And I'm going to be a hero. I hope I make you proud. With that he got up and brushed himself off, heading back towards the mansion. The summer went by fast. Katsuki was able to get back to work, putting his all into everything he did. In the evenings he would take his new black kitsune mask, in homage to Suku's passing, and wander the streets helping anyone he could by treating wounds, basic hygiene products, or something as simple as talking to them. In return they told him things. Any free time was shared between training with Kenichi and his men, and hanging out with Kirishima. Training got more intense as time got on, their sparring sessions lasting over an hour, with it usually ending in a draw more often than not. Then they added knives and other types of weapons. One of the men even taught him how to pick locks. Skills valued by the underground but useful to a young hero in training. It was the first day of school and Katsuki was eyeing himself up in the mirror. His uniform fit the way it should, baggy, so as not to feel restricting. Okay, he looked borderline delinquent but he was okay with that. Grabbing his bag he headed down to the kitchens to grab something quick to take on his way. Look at you little hero Spawn, surprisingly lax on that dress code I see. Kenichi drawled. I prefer comfort over some else's fucking opinion. The two glared at each other before Rolex ruined a perfectly good stare down by cracking a grin. Are you sure I can't drive you? As tempting as it is to have a Yakuza boss chauffeur my ass around and drop me off at the UA gates, I think I will fucking pass. Aizawa already thinks I am staying somewhere shady. Eraserhead needs to get the stick out of his ass. For an underground hero, he is surprisingly unbribable. Fucking good. If he's gonna be my heroics teacher, I prefer if he wasn't a corrupt asshole. The two had a history according to Kenichi, but Katsuki was not willing to delve any deeper into that can of worms. Kenichi pouted. Is that all I am? A corrupted asshole? You're a Yakuza boss. Pretty sure you can't be corrupted by definition? True. I already am a complete badass. You're a fucking kitten with a trigger fetish. Get it right? Cheeky brat. Have a good first day. Ya see ya? Katsuki gave a wave over his shoulder as he left. Who, in their right fucking mind, leaves 19? Oh, he did not include himself in that bullshit, unsupervised supercharged children in a classroom by themselves? It was loud, it was chaotic, and punching someone the first day was entirely possible. Thank the gods shitty hair was in one, at least he was a buffer from all the stupid. His human puppy act was amazing at drawing people to him and away, far away from Katsuki. A flash of emerald appeared, before arms a lot stronger than they used to be, wrapped around his waist. Kaken. I knew you would be at the top of that entrance exam. Katsuki placed a palm on the nerd's face and pushed him back to arm's length. Watch it, Deku. He snapped. It wasn't aggressive, he just needed his space, but the brunette beside Deku seemed to take offense to the manhandling. Her cheeks puffed up like a chipmunk's. That was so rude. He was just excited to congratulate you. She snapped, her little foot stomping the ground, fists clenched at her side. Fuck off. The nerd can congratulate from over there. Katsuki growled, quite literally thanks to his healed but still messed up throat. Keep your attack squirrel on a leash, Deku. Her face turned red, but Midoriya did manage to usher her away, spouting apologizes and stating that was just how Katsuki talked. He flopped into his desk and tossed a leg onto the top. Taking a moment to scan the room, before he even got a proper look, his view was blocked by a big guy, with engines coming out of his legs. The words coming out of his mouth smelt like rich bitch prep school talk, so Katsuki chose to ignore him and instead went back to studying his surroundings. Hey! Katsuki looked to his left where a floating uniform came to stand by him. I saw what you meant at the entrance exam, you were exciting to watch. I never got a chance to thank you for giving me the heads up. Don't worry about it. He mumbled. Four Eyes was still trying to reprimand him and the Invisibitch was trying to engage him in typical teenage chit-chat, and he wanted none of it. His intense glare made both hesitate. Are you fucking done? He demanded. Is that any way to speak in class? Four Eyes tried to meet his stare but faltered and decided to turn on his heel and walk away. A yelp from Deku brought his attention to Walking Dead as he emerged from his ugly-ass sleeping bag. The man was out a good portion of the night patrolling, so Katsuki knew he had to sleep at some point, but did it have to be in class? Homeroom went by quickly, which was followed by a quirk assessment test that led to the first usage of his first aid skills. What the fuck, Deku? He muttered, grabbing the boy by the back of his shirt and making him sit down. He cast a pissed-off look at Aizawa for pushing the kid to break a fucking finger before starting to wrap the swollen finger to the one beside it. What happened to being quirkless? He whispered/growled. The boy chuckled nervously and ran a hand through his curls. Yeah, well, they guess my body just wasn't strong enough to use the power yet? So, late bloomer. That wasn't right. Quirks were hereditary and Katsuki knew both of the nerd's parents. He could tell Midoriya didn't want to talk about it though. Whatever, fucker. Keep your secrets. But get to fucking recovery girl at the bell. I don't think it's in pieces, but you certainly did a fucking number on it. Oh, okay, Kaken. Thank you. Yeah. Whatever. Glancing over his shoulder, he could see the rest of the extras looking at them. He gave them his best snarl before pushing the first aid kit back into his bag. They got the idea and looked away, most grumbling about his attitude. Whatever, he wasn't there to make a bunch of fucking friends. Glancing at the leaderboard, he had to growl to himself. The Bakugo fucking Katsuki did not come in third. He would have to work hard to fix that. Lunchtime swung around. Katsuki pulled his bento box from his bag, trying to decide where to eat when Shitty Hair appeared at the side of his desk. Hey Baku bro. Signal blinding fucking smile. Wanna come eat with us in the cafeteria? Over the redhead's shoulder were 3 annoying-looking fuckers squirming anxiously at the door. Blondie was a fucking loud one, sassy to boot. Discount Spider-Man was a stoner if he ever saw one, but was equally hard on the head, and the pink chick with the raccoon eyes was vibrating with energy. Fucking. Thanks. Nah. I'm good, Shark Week. Katsuki shouldered his bag to emphasize he had places to go. Yeah, okay, dude. Maybe tomorrow. And with that he sauntered away, still admitting all the fucking serotonin one could handle. Katsuki made up his mind and wandered to the nurse's office. Recovery girl was busy with a student and didn't notice him slip in behind her to her desk. He carefully set up shop next to her own laid-out meal and started his lunch. When she finished up, she walked in and nearly jumped out of her skin. I am an old woman, Katsuki. Warn me when you are here. He smirked. What is it Aizawa likes to say? Work on your situational awareness. That earned him a cuff up the back of the head. He merely chuckled at her. The two ate in silence. Katsuki finished first, so took it upon himself to clean up her infirmary. It was a somber moment when he realized how similar it felt, and remembered how Suku used to grumble about him not doing it right, though smiling the whole time. Before lunch was done, the two of them even got her supplies order put away and organized. The bell rang to signal the end of lunch. Katsuki shouldered his bag and started to the door. If you ever want to come up here and give me a hand, you are always welcome to, Chio said before he could leave. He gave a nod, not trusting his voice just then. Evening classes were all boring until they got to the actual heroic class. All Might, his childhood hero. Teaching here. Katsuki stayed back eyeing the man. For some reason he wasn't feeling very gracious to be in the number 1 hero's presence. The sludge villain incident came to mind first, but then the looks that seemed to be passing between the man and Deku also gave him pause. Fuckers were obvious about it too. The exercise was simple enough, but Katsuki definitely did not trust his partner, which led to them splitting up early on. No way he was going to take orders from that fucker. The actual fighting, though, was a pleasant surprise. Deku was fucking wily. And put up a good fight. Fuck him for winning, but he had to give the greenette credit where credit was due. The glasses asshole, on the other hand, although followed the rules, was way too rigid, and he still didn't trust his abilities. His all-out fighting didn't gain him any good feeling with his classmates. Apparently he was too violent, and shame on him for picking on Deku. Picking on him? The crazy fucker broke his arm just to win. That wasn't on Katsuki. All it was an okay day, but not one he was super proud of. Well, hero school was still high school, and not everything was going to be fucking unicorns and rainbows. He was leaving when Aizawa stopped him, with just a mere look by the way. The rest of the extras filled out, Deku lingering for just a moment before slipping out as well. All Might should have stopped that exercise. The man said offhand. What's the point of training if you aren't gonna put your foo? The curse word died on his lips. He had cursed in front of Aizawa before, but it felt wrong to do it in school. If you aren't going to put your all in? Aizawa might have smirked, but it was hidden behind his capture scarf. True. But you aren't here to kill your classmates. Just be aware of the damage. He waved a hand to dismiss it. That is not why I wanted to talk to you, though. I just wanted to remind you that heroic students are not allowed to work while in school. It is a security issue. Is that going to be a problem? No, I paid my tuition in full, and my friend does not mind housing me. Your friend isn't requiring anything else from you in exchange, are they? Katsuki couldn't stop the scowl that came over his face, nor the curse this time. Who the fuck do you take me for? He demanded. Language. Aizawa's tone stayed passive. I am just making sure you are safe. Teens in rough situations are easy targets for bad people. I am not an easy target. You are an underage teen living on the street, you won't call the cops for anything, and you have no parental support from what I can tell. The man counted off on his fingers. I still have half a mind to place you in protective custody. I am fine. You'd be wasting the cops' time with that. They would easily tell that there is nothing wrong at my house. I choose to stay with my friend because of personal issues, but it's not a big deal. Still bullshit, but Aizawa still didn't have enough evidence to take it to the cops. Fine. I will drop it. For now. Katsuki grabbed his bag and took a step towards the door. You still wandering the street near the clinic? Everything stopped. What? Can't go for walks now? Well, that depends. Are you wearing the kitsune mask and digging up information while you help people? Because that would be dangerous. Katsuki glanced at him from the corner of his eye. Obviously he already knew the answer, but it was what he was going to do about it that was the question. People still need help. Suku's death left a large hole in the community. I just want to do my part. Aizawa held out a small black device. I can't stop you, but I am asking you to have this on your person when you go out. It is a tracker. Katsuki shifted but made no move to reach for it. That was a huge ask. I just want to know you are safe, Bakugo. If something happens I can pull it up, but I promise not to do it unless I fear that something went wrong. His expression was dead serious. It might be okay to know someone had his back. Slowly Katsuki reached out and took it. Fine. Can I go now? With the answering nod, Katsuki jogged from the campus, tracker sitting heavy in his pocket. There was no way he would wear it to the mansion. That would definitely cause problems with Kenichi. The logical alternative was to keep it with his new mask that was tucked safely in his alley stash. He kept all his personal and medical supplies there that he needed on his daily rounds. Later that evening, Katsuki found himself knelt before an older man, wrapped in dirty rags. He was carefully cleaning a seeping sore on the man's leg. Behind him he heard some soft footsteps. Red eyes snapped up to the young man. He was a local drug dealer that Katsuki had helped before. Kitsune. Man, it's good to see you. What's up, Ren? The second part was directed towards the old man Katsuki was treating. Damn leg again. The man grumbled, watching Katsuki wrap the calf. When he was done, the teen rooted through his bag and brought out a small pill bottle, a bottle of sealed water, and a packaged meat bun. Allergic to anything, Ren? Katsuki asked before handing it over to a shake of the head. Make sure you finish the bottle of fucking antibiotics, or this is gonna just keep coming back, got it? Yeah, I got it, kid. Thanks. Katsuki stood and walked up to greet the young man with a fist bump. They walked a little ways away from the man to gain some privacy. Not being much for small talk, Katsuki rifled through his bag again to come out with a small care package. There were a handful of condoms, a couple clean needles, water bottle, a toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, and a few ready-to-eat meal bars. He handed it over expectantly. Hey, thanks man. Really do appreciate it. He gave a crooked half grin that was sincere. If you need more or know someone that does, tell them to head to the small noodle shop on the corner. Owner was friends with Suku, said I could leave some fucking packages there. Just ask for the Kitsune special. I know I can be hard to find these days. That's great, I'll tell a couple of the girls. They've really been missing the old man. He moved a couple steps closer and dropped his voice. You still looking for stuff on Shai Hasaikai? Yeah, you got something? Might not be much, but I know that a lot of us dealers have been pressured to take on some of their drugs. It's called Trigger. That shit fucks with your quirk. Supercharges it or some shit. Been popular with the local criminals. You selling it? Nah. Around here we stay to the regular shit, make you feel good stuff, not destroy humanity stuff. But there are a few of their dealers floating around. One set up shop over by the walking trails. Big guy. Fucked up face. Alright, thanks. If they come around asking about me, don't play a fucking hero, got it? I can handle myself, just tell them whatever the fuck they want to know. The young man gave a sharp head shake. No can do, dude. We gotta look after each other around here, fuck those guys. One thing street trash is good for is keeping our mouths shut. Katsuki couldn't argue that. He gave another nod before turning and heading back through the maze of alleyways. The spot the dealer was talking about was empty when he went by, but he would have to make a point to check back the next day during his regular rounds. School continued on. Recovery Girl became his go-to for refreshing his supplies for his nightly rounds, and every evening Kitsune spent at least an hour watching the burly drug dealer that hung out by the trails. It was an easy enough routine, but he was starting to feel the pull-off exhaustion. Homework, working out, and some social time was needed to round out his life to make it look at least a little healthy. All of which left little time for sleep. You know, Kirishima sighed, looking over at the blonde. You don't have to push yourself so hard, nothing is going to crash and burn if you take some time off. Shitty Hair didn't know half the crap he actually did, but he was observant enough to know Katsuki was pushing the limits. Can't be number one if I am not willing to fucking work for it. He answered back, flipping the page to continue his homework. True, but you need to do something fun. Why don't you come to my house this weekend? My moms are taking me hiking in the mountains. Spend a night out in the wilderness, camping. Katsuki paused. That did sound like something he might like. Kirishima must have seen his hesitation in saying no, because his face broke into a huge smile, forcing the teen to give in without hardly a fight. Yeah, okay, Shitty Hair. What time do you want me to come over? Come home with me Friday night, we are leaving Saturday morning. I'll let my moms know. Great. A whole weekend. Wasted? Well, maybe not wasted, but still not productive. Katsuki perched lightly on the edge of the building, his form mostly hidden by a billboard. He was watching the walking lump of a man that was selling trigger. So far he didn't have a whole lot of customers, which was good, but Katsuki still made sure to get a picture of anyone that did buy. He would send them along to the cops anonymously just to be on the safe side. This was low-level shit, Katsuki knew that, but wherever there was a small fry there was usually a bigger fish close by. His patience eventually paid off. It was close to when he would have called it a night when an unremarkable car pulled up in front of the man. Showing all signs that he knew the driver, the Hulk wannabe slid into the passenger side. Katsuki jotted down the plate number on the back of his hand, though he did suspect it was going to come back stolen. What criminal was stupid enough to drive his personal vehicle around to pick up dealers? There was no way Katsuki could have followed the car, not without using his explosions, and that was an easy way to get himself tagged by cops and perps alike. What he could do though is run the plate, see what he got there. Kenichi would help him if he asked. In fact, he had already offered the little information his gang had been able to pull on their rivals, but it was not very useful. Katsuki didn't want to bother anyone with his personal vendetta. The Yakuza boss was already going out of his way to give him a place to stay. That was something else he was going to have to rectify too, find a way to pay the boss back. He doubted money would be accepted. But that was for another night, one thing at a fucking time. Katsuki slipped down from his high lookout and wove through the streets with ease. An eye always over his shoulder in case he was being followed. He eventually got to his destination. A bakery. It was about to close, but the pretty girl behind the counter flashed him a grin and assured him that for Kitsune they would take another 5 minutes. The sandwich was very specific. A toasted sardine, on 5 grain with melted garlic and herb cheese. The girl wrinkled her nose. Yeah, I know. My friend has a fucking unique palate. Katsuki muttered. Just be thankful I didn't order that stinky thing when you had customers in here. With the offering in hand, Katsuki started off again. Turning down an unassuming alley, he could see the vibrant spray paint murals start to appear a few steps in. Little tags turned into massive underwater scenes into space and finally into a glowing form of a smiling demon shrouded in smoke. The demon was tall with dark red skin, sharp teeth and grossly disproportioned with muscles. Pausing to look over the art, Katsuki couldn't help but snort a laugh. The door he was looking for was to the left of the mural. No need to be polite here. He smashed on the door several times, only to hear a crash and a colorful string of curses from behind it. A mechanical whirl brought his attention to a small camera above the door. Instead of letting the man see his face, or mask in his case, he held up the bakery bag. The door unlocked immediately. It took a second for his eyes to adjust to the bright blue lights coming off all the computer monitors when Katsuki entered the cramped apartment. Goji was waiting for him at the kitchen counter. The man was thin, pale from lack of daylight, with dark gray hair though he was only 23. Around his mouth and nose, misty clouds puffed with each breath. "Kitsune. You little devil. I heard you made it out of that mess." "Of course I fucking did. Sorry about, Goji clapped his hands together, creating another puff of smoke. He never did like having uncomfortable conversations. "Anyway, I see you have something for me." Katsuki dropped the bag on the counter before leaning his back against it to scan the room. "That thing is a fucking monstrosity and should have never been brought into existence." Katsuki grumbled. The bag crinkled, then the poignant smell wafted through the small room. Goji obviously disagreed because he gave a sinful moan as he bit into it. It was enough to make Katsuki curl his nose and walk away to let the two have their moment. Only when the man was licking the crumbs off his fingertips did Katsuki come back to the counter. "Fucking delicious." Goji smiled. "So, I ate the payment. What were you paying for? Can you run this plate for me? See if it's stolen, if not, pull the owner's records." With a flip of his hands the man chuckled. "Child's play, Kitsune. I thought you had a challenge for me? Well, owner might have ties to Shai Hasaikai. For your discretion. I'll understand if you don't want to be fucking involved." The room remained quiet for a couple heartbeats, then Goji shrugged and smiled. "No one can track me anyway. I am a ghost." Bold declaration, but he was probably right. Goji was a shut-in, very few people had ever seen him, and he was a master of electronics and computers. Katsuki had met him after he had hacked the phone service provider and direct messaged Suku about getting antibiotics brought to his place. They were acquaintances at best, but it was important to keep tabs on anyone that had such helpful skill sets. Not 10 minutes and Katsuki was in possession of a thick file that contained everything from driving records, criminal records, and a list of known associates. That list was probably the most helpful. Back to his earlier assumption that no one was stupid enough to take their personal car to pick up a drug dealer, he was happy to realize he was wrong. Fucking idiots. Nice. Thanks, man. Katsuki glanced up at the grinning maniac. "So that painting outside? Got a local brat to do it. Self-portrait. What do you think?" The smoke curled around his smile. The skinny fucker had the nerve look proud of himself. "Another sandwich tomorrow if you can give me more on these two fuckers here," Katsuki said, pointing to the pictures of one Hekiji Tengai, who he recognized as one of the men with Chisaki that night. The second was another random face he recognized from the attack. "And a kale smoothie with aloe and boba pearls?" he asks with unbridled enthusiasm. Sure, that's a fucking thing?" It was indeed a fucking thing. The next evening Katsuki had 2 more files to go through. Taking a page out of Midoriya's book, he got himself a notebook and started an intense breakdown of everything he knew thus far. Friday morning Katsuki was tired but content in the week's work, both on the school front and on his information gathering. Last night he had told Kenichi he would be spending the weekend with a friend. Kenichi, the fucking pervert, proceeded to fill his overnight back with condoms, lube, and a medical pamphlet about teenage sex. Thank the gods he had noticed that shit before he brought the bag to school. Of course the men just laughed their asses off when he left the mansion scarlet red from ears to chest. Katsuki made his way to his desk and pushed the bag under his seat before sitting down. Kirishima was quick to bounce over with a wide smile. "Hey man, I am so excited for this weekend. It's gonna be so much fun." "What's happening this weekend, EI?" Lightning Rod piped in. With some degree of a death wish he laid himself across Katsuki's desk with a grin and stupid wide eyes. Katsuki gripped the edge of the desk and dumped him off unceremoniously while Kirishima actually replied. "Me at Bakubro are going hiking with my moms in the mountain. We have a tent and everything." "Camping?" The tape fucker was now crowding his desk too. "You mean you are going out to release the wild Bakuga back into his natural habitat?" A quick explosion in front of his face caused the 2 idiots to laugh and at least back away a bit. The conversation was cut short by Aizawa walking in. For once the stupid yellow sleeping bag was nowhere in sight. "All right, settle down," he growled. All sounds ceased to fucking exist at the sight of his quirk activating. "You all have 10 minutes to get your hero suits on and meet me out front." Today we are working on rescue operations at the USJ. Surprised face, I am working on the assumption that anyone reading this knows what went down at the USJ. Over the next 2 hours, Katsuki learned several things. First, Aizawa had no right to yell at them about having self-sacrificing traits. Essel. Second, Midoriya was a fucking menace to himself, and Inko should really wrap the nerd in bubble wrap every time he stepped out the front door. Not to mention All Might needed a swift kick for encouraging that shit. What was with those fucking two anyway? Third, Kirishima is more than a pretty face. Yes, he was a pretty face too, but those were fucking emotions he was in no way ready to tackle. What he was willing to speak about though was how tough the bastard was, and that he was a reliable fighter to have in your corner. Fourth, the League of Villains was on his shit list. Recovery Girl was tending to Aizawa, who was alive but still out, and Midoriya, getting them prepped for the ambulances to take them to the hospital, so Katsuki decided to take it on himself and grabbed one of the large school first aid kits. The rest of the class only had minor injuries, so he got to work. Ponytail yelped in surprise when he took her hand and immediately started to clean the scrapes she had across them before wrapping them. She was still in shock when he finished and moved on to the pink bitch. His quick, effective first aid was enough to convince them just to let him do it, as did a few harsh "stop fucking moving" but the group seemed shocked and unable to process the turn of events. He didn't do it for thank yous, but one would think somebody could have had some sort of manners to at least mutter one. He was fixing up Dunce's face, who was still fried, when the parents started to arrive. He internally gagged at the falling tears and hugs being so freely given. It didn't occur to him that this might be a problem until he heard a loud, familiar voice that made his skin freeze over. There was barely time to process the woman walking towards him before a hand rose and a loud slap sounded across the gymnasium. His cheek stung as he kept his face turned away from her. Everything fell silent and Katsuki wished they would all just look away because he could feel the eyes. Kirishima and his two mothers wore frowns deeper set than anyone else's. "Let's go." Bokogu Mitsuki seethed from between her teeth. At least she didn't hit him again. Katsuki put the first aid stuff away and turned to follow her. He avoided looking at anyone but shitty hair. He mouthed a quick sorry before following his mother out. Their weekend plans were just destroyed. Katsuki found himself standing in the kitchen of his childhood home watching his mother dump out the entire contents of both of his bags onto the table. New phone. New clothes. She held up 2 condoms that he had missed. "Well, that answers how you got all this stuff and paid for school." She threw them at him. He opened his mouth to say something, but she held up a finger to silence him. "Choose your words wisely, Katsuki, because you say anything I don't like, or do anything, I will pull you out of UA without a second thought." She sneered at him. Wisely he clicked his mouth shut. "That is what I thought." A sharp fingernail poked him in the chest. He had put on considerable amount of muscle since the last time he was home, and he was a few inches taller than her, but fuck, she was still the scariest thing he had to face. It didn't help that his life and education were in her hands. Being 15 meant all the major decisions were with their discretion legally. "I've been trying to get a hold of you for weeks, you ungrateful piece of shit." The finger stabbed again. "Outrunning the roads, fucking your way through life. I am not a whore." Katsuki growled out. "And you're the one that told me not to fucking come back, right?" She rolled her eyes, apparently remembering their conversation differently. "Listen to the fucking words coming out of my mouth, hag. I am not selling myself, I am not a prostitute. I got a fucking job to pay for school, cleaning villain disaster sites. Call my boss if you don't fucking believe me." Please call him, he thought as he looked at his phone. He wished Kenichi was expecting him home tonight and not Sunday. "Right?" she said again, still not believing him. Her fingers grabbed his chin to hold his head still. "I guess your punishment can't harm the merchandise now, can it? Should start charging you a fee to use our names on your goddamn application for school. What do your fuck buddies pay?" "Fuck you. I was doing just fine without coming back here. You obviously don't fucking like me, why can't you just let me go? I'll make sure the school doesn't phone you again." It wasn't pleading, but it was close. He got a smile in return, not a nice smile either. "That was when you were a worthless brat. I might actually be able to use you now." She slapped his cheek to emphasize the point. "Clean this place up and start on supper." Your punishment will come once your father gets home. And I'll hang on to this for now. She picked up his phone and slid it into her pocket. What was it with people just wanting to use him? Did he have a sign on his fucking back? His mother had always been a nasty piece of work, letting her anger dictate her actions. This new, conniving version of the hag was a whole different kind of monster. Katsuki slowly picked up his things and folded them back into his bags before walking them up to his bedroom. Nothing had changed. It was still just a generic bedroom with nothing overly personal in it, save for an old All Might poster beside the bed. Deku had given it to him on his 4th birthday. The house wasn't dirty, not really, but his mother's standards were high. Not to mention after fighting for his life he was already sore and tired, so being on his hands and knees scrubbing the floor sucked more than normal. Supper was almost done by the time his father walked through the door. The man paused and stared at him long and hard before walking away without a word to find Mitsuki. Katsuki plated 3 servings of curry. He didn't bother telling them it was ready. They would show up promptly at 6 whether it was ready or not. He sat in front of his plate, staring at it, knowing better than to even take one bite without his mother's permission. Right on time the two entered the kitchen in their respective spots, Mitsuki at the head of the table, her husband on her right, and Katsuki on her left. The woman was all smiles. Isn't this nice? Family back together sitting down for a meal? Her eyes leveled on Katsuki. He kept his reply lodged in the back of his throat. She looked at his plate. Now Katsuki, she reached over and took the plate, setting it away from him. I can't having you eating too much. Wouldn't want you to get fat, you're already looking a little pudgy. As if he had any fat on him. Controlling bitch. Still he remained silent. His eyes followed the swirls of steam coming off the meal as Masaru and Mitsuki ate and talked about their days to each other. When they finished, Masaru stood up and collected the plates. Since Katsuki cooked, only right that I clean up, he stated. A nice gesture had Katsuki's plate not been the first one he took and emptied into the trash. So what do you think, hon? Should we bring the brat to the office this weekend? Mitsuki asked, her voice strong with a flicker of amusement. At least we would be able to keep him out of trouble. He is what, 16 now? 15. Katsuki snarled, folding his arms across his chest. Going with them on the weekends sounded like hell. Instead of shoving his out the door, they were hauling him in, to keep him under their thumbs. Some subtle quirk-suppressant cuffs, and some decent clothes. It would be fine. The man glanced at Katsuki over his shoulder. You did say he understood that any outburst, any disobedience would result in his removal from UA, right? Mitsuki grinned, sharp canines flashing, in an eerily familiar look that Katsuki was sure he wore when he was fighting and winning. Oh, he is well aware of that. I don't see a problem with it. Might teach him some responsibility. Responsibility? He couldn't yell it, but it came out sharp. I got accepted into the top hero school in the country. I worked my construction job for the entire summer to pay for it. His throat started to ache, but he couldn't bring himself to care. I have a place to live. I survived a fucking villain attack at my school. What more? His words were cut off by the large hand of his father gripping a fistful of hair and pulling his head back hard enough to send his chair clattering across the floor. He barely got his feet under him before the man started pulling him away, towards the basement door. How about responsibility for you actions? His mother called. That's what we are teaching you. She is right, Katsuki. You brought this on yourself. Saturday morning around 8 his father returned to release him. Outside his bedroom door he was handed a suit bag. You have 10 minutes to get ready. And make yourself presentable if you are going BB at the agency. Katsuki said nothing as the man walked away. Fuck him. UA was his dream, but was it worth this bullshit? If he ran away they would send the cops after him, but surely Kenichi had ways of keeping them away, right? With a deep sigh Katsuki turned to the shower. No, he was going to be a hero, number fucking one, even if it was out of pure spite for these sorry excuses for parents. Living and succeeding were gonna be his greatest fuck you to those bastards. The water stung like a bitch. It was good that the dress shirt was at least black so that stains wouldn't show through. The pants were uncomfortably snug, but at least they stretched enough for him to move. His hair was everywhere, but that was just how it went. There was no taming it without hours of time, and a bottle of heavy-duty gel. At the front door his parents were waiting for him. The workaholics that they were meant they went in a little later on the weekends but still went into their agency without. His mother gave him a once-over with only a slight sneer, which was just as good as approval from her. He was ignored for the ride and all the way to the top floor of their office building. When they walked in though things changed, as they normally did when his mother was around her clients. Suddenly her arm was looped around his, and her large professional smile dawned her face. "Good morning," Mitsuki greeted her staff. Masaru disappeared to go help with the clothing line. Katsuki let himself be led all the way back to his mother's office. "Is Dark here yet?" she asked her personal assistant outside her office door. "Yes, ma'am. He just arrived." "Good." Her grip on his arm became painful. "Remember your place, Katsuki. One toe on that line and you can kiss Yue goodbye." Inside the office Mitsuki greeted an older, portly man with enthusiasm, kissing his jowl-like cheeks on each side. "So good to see you, Bakugo-san," he greeted, looking as lovely as ever. "Thank you, Dark-san." She grabbed Katsuki's arm and pulled him closer, to his displeasure. "Dark-san, this is my son Katsuki. He will be looking after you today. Coffee, lunch, whatever you need to make today's design go easier." Katsuki watched as the man's eyes roamed, unapologetically, over his entire body. He scowled but kept his mouth shut. My Bakugo-san, he certainly got your looks, didn't he?" The day had been horribly slow. He poured so many coffees, and was sent out 3 different times to get the pig different food items because he was famished, but worst of all was the casual touches. Hand lingering on his arm, fingers pressed into his back when he walked by, or leaning over so far he was literally whispering in Katsuki's ear to tell him things. The whole time his mother glaring at him, daring him to say anything. Yue better be worth this bullshit. He would rather be beaten again than deal with this a second longer. The urge to blow the fucker up was there and growing. Lucky for him the cork-suppressant bracelets that were clasped on his wrists prevented him from sparking off the nitro on his palms. Once they got back to the house Katsuki bolted to the bathroom and emptied what little there was in his stomach. He then crawled his ass into a scalding shower to try and make himself feel a little less dirty. It still stung but he didn't care. Any hope that he could slip to his room and pass out were dashed when his father was found standing outside the door. "Your mother wants you downstairs, now." The "fuck off" was on his lips, but then his father's hand was on his upper arm digging finger-shaped bruises into his skin. As soon as he saw his mother waiting with that look, he knew it was gonna be bad. Monday morning came eventually. His mother finally relented and let him have his phone back, telling him she didn't care where he went during the week but on weekends he was to be home. Opening the phone, it was obvious the woman had searched through all his messages. Thankfully there wasn't anything she could give him shit for since he erased all the old conversations as he went. Shitty Hair had sent a handful of texts hoping he was okay and wondering if he was in trouble with his mom. Katsuki gave a quick text back saying she was just high-strung and the situation upset her. He replied back immediately, glad Katsuki was okay and that he would see him in class. The 30 or so messages from Kenichi were more concerning. The man was worried about the villain attack, then thought maybe Katsuki had still gone on the hiking trip, but the lack of responses after the time he was supposed to be back at the mansion led to some more heavy-worded texts. Katsuki replied and it came up as read but he got nothing back. Maybe the man was mad? The thought made him nervous. Despite being a bit of a pessimist, he had never actually considered what he would do if Kenichi grew tired of his shit and kicked him out. He would have to wait to see the man after school. There were swarms of reporters around UA preventing students from getting in and generally causing a scene. Katsuki eyed the mess but hung back, like hell he wanted to walk through there. A few minutes later a couple pros came out to move them along. Katsuki pushed forward, hoping he had enough of a scowl on that no one was going to try and ask him anything. It worked for the most part, but one of the reporters caught his eye. The man was average everything, he shouldn't have stood out at all but his camera was trained on Katsuki and the teen could hear the shutter going off. He turned his back on the man as soon as he could and disappeared into the school. This spiked his anxiety even more. The other students were all staring at him along with the rest of Class 1A. Apparently word of the attack had spread enough to have them curious, and being teens they didn't have much tact. Speaking of tact, his class didn't have it either. As soon as he walked in, the whole place went silent. Eyes stared at him with concern. Most of the damage from his home visit was under his shirt, save for the bruise on his left jaw. Honestly though, it could have come from the villains. Not that any of those nobodies had even managed to fucking touch him. His class didn't seem to believe that either though. "Hey Baku bro," Kirishima called out as he bounded over. Wide smile faltering for only a moment at the sight of the bruise. "Guess we need to reschedule our camping trip, huh? It will probably be a while before the fucking hag lets me out of her sight again." Katsuki hesitated, not liking how the boy deflated. He added, "But we can hang out after school if you want." Yeah, okay." Kirishima nodded enthusiastically. Raccoon Eyes made her way over, followed by the Stoner and Lightning Rod. Leave it to Kaminari though to state the fucking obvious. "You mom is scary, dude. Like, I almost shit myself seeing her coming across the gym. She always like that?" Katsuki opened his mouth to say something when the door opened behind him, and he saw a heavily bandaged Aizawa enter. The distraction from Lightning Rod's question was welcome, the look of his teacher was not. "You should not be here," Katsuki stated firmly, ignoring the wince from his classmates at his tone. "You look like you're gonna fucking keel over right here. Go fucking rest." "As much as I appreciate the concern, Bakugo, I have a job to do and we need to start discussing the sports festival." It seems no one mentioned to the mummy that his Pisco mother appeared on campus, so Katsuki wisely shut his mouth and sat down. "Small miracles. The school is still having it?" Ida asked from the back of the class. "Yes, so we will need to start preparing." The rest of the day was a blur. Fortunately, with all the commotion and drama, no one brought up the scene with his mother again, but all of the other teachers seemed to be sharing Aizawa's insistence to train for the sports festival. When it finally ended, Katsuki found himself at a nearby coffee shop with Kiri and his idiot squad. Sipping his black coffee, he watched the morons talk and behave like children. Which they were, he supposed. He never had much of a chance to screw around like this. And it was odd that he found himself enjoying their antics, just a little, but he couldn't bring himself to join. Instead he watched, grunted a response when prompted, and tried not to explode Kaminari when he prodded him. Close to 5 the group split up and headed home. Ashido was actually heading the same way as Katsuki. He never asked her but silently waited at the station with her, and to her constant yammering, walked her to her front door. She stopped in surprise when they arrived, looking between Katsuki and the door. "You," she suddenly smiled, "you walked me home. Thanks Baku babe. I appreciate it." He did not explode her when she hugged him, but he wiggled away quickly. "Yeah, well, we were just in a villain attack," he reasoned. Turning on his heel, he backtracked a bit before taking the normal route to the outskirts where Kenichi's mansion stood. He paused a moment when his phone suddenly blew up with messages. Opening it up, he was not surprised to see that Kirishima had added him to the stupidly named group chat, Baku Squad. What the fuck? Now all the morons had his number. He paused. He actually wasn't mad about that. Okay, well, that was a thing. At the mansion, Katsuki found Kenichi sitting in his home office. He gave a knock on the doorframe before entering. The whole weekend had been a shitstorm and Katsuki just needed to get it all out on the table. Maybe Kenichi could even help with his situation. The fact his home life was severely abusive was something he never stated outright, not even to Suku. Katsuki took a deep breath to calm his nerves. His greeting died on his lips as the man looked up. Suspecting the man was pissed off was a lot different than seeing the man pissed off. Maybe the man was worried, maybe he really just cared, but his outlet for his anger was to yell. Kenichi was in his face telling him that this wasn't a babysitting service and that he expected his men to follow orders. Katsuki's orders were to message him when they got back so he knew everything was okay. Loyalty was non-negotiable. Through it all, Katsuki stood there. Red creeping up his neck to his ears, he had already spent his weekend being beaten and abused, and paraded around for nasty rich people. This meant he was in no mood to take even more bullshit from the Yakuza boss. Kenichi's temper was bad, Katsuki's could be explosive. Without being able to yell back, he opted for close-quarter talking and popping of his quirk to emphasize the key points. "After all I have done for you, I just expected a lot more consideration," Kenichi spewed, finishing his long-winded rant. "Fuck you." Katsuki's hands popped as he went toe-to-toe with the man. There were circumstances out of my control. I messaged when I fucking could. Last I checked I was not one of your men. No, you're certainly not. My men prove themselves. Earn their place. It was said in anger. Katsuki was smart enough to know that they needed to back off and let each other breath. But those words pierced through him a little too close to home. Things were not just given, everything had a price, and his and Kenichi's relationship was too one-sided. Katsuki stepped back, gave a curt nod and turned on his heel. Where the fuck are you going, Katsuki? We are not done here. The teen didn't bother to reply. He went to his room, packed his duffel bag along with his school bag and walked out of the mansion. Eyes watched him go, but no one tried to stop him. On the street, Katsuki pulled his phone and sent a quick message to Kirishima, asking if he could crash with him for a couple nights. Using the back of his hand, he wiped at his face in anger. The confirmation message came moments later and Katsuki made his way quickly. Later that night, he found himself curled up on a futon on Kiri's floor. Stomach happily full, wrapped in a warm blanket, and listening to his friend's soft snores. This couldn't be a regular weekday thing, he knew, but it was a good option for that night. He really needed to be surrounded by a real family, real love. Maybe someday he could have that too. Maybe the sports festival was a way to show them he was worth their attention. With the hole in his chest burning for his dead mentor, he swore to himself he was going to win. He would be number one, and he would bring down Chisaki Kai. Two separate goals, but both so important. Katsuki spent 2 nights at Kiri's, his mom's insisting on it as they fed and pampered him much like Deku's mom did when he used to go over there as a small brat. Shitty hair was even a good roommate, not touching his stuff or getting on his nerves at all. Still, he didn't want to ruin his welcome, so Thursday he packed his bag and told them he had a place to go. It wasn't really a lie. A dark corner of an alley was a place, not a fun one, but he would rather go there than back to his parents before he was forced to. Kicking the door open to the classroom usually warranted some of the extras jumping, but it seemed they were growing used to his antics because some people looked up, but most just greeted him. Morning, Kaken. Blasty. Pink arms wrapped around his neck, ignoring the scowl and sparking hands in favor of a hug. Stop touching me, he growled, her arms accidentally pushing on his healing back. The 3 days had sucked pain-wise, but so far he was able to keep it from affecting his training or schoolwork. Aizawa, being high on pain meds and still wrapped in bandages, kept the normally observant man from questioning him. Speaking of the devil, said man walked into the classroom, sans wrappings and a fresh new scar under his right eye. Looking good, sir? Kaminari shouted. Good to see you are feeling better now, sensei, Momo offered. Thank you. Now all of you, to your seats, class started 30 seconds ago. The extras bolted. Katsuki froze when those tired eyes zeroed in on the yellowing bruise on his jaw. Bakugu, why didn't you see recovery girl for your injuries? What injuries? Katsuki snapped a little, not wanting any more attention. The bruise on your face, he deadpanned. Yeah, his mom has a mean. The look Katsuki leveled at the dumb blonde was enough for that side of the class to flinch back, and Kami to actually shut his mouth. It's just a bruise, sir, it's fine, Katsuki muttered before taking his seat. It took all his skill to avoid Aizawa for the rest of the day. After lunch he seemed to be particularly keen on snagging Katsuki for a conversation. Fuck that. Every conversation he had with an adult he had any respect for came crashing down this week. Nope. Not happening. His quirk might be explosions, but fuck anyone that thought his weak point would be stealth. End of the day, Katsuki slipped out of that school without even Deku seeing which way he went. Stowing his 2 bags in his new hiding place, he pulled out a spare change of clothes and his black kitsune mask. He changed in the alley, tucked away far enough that no one on the street could see him. After a good stretch he started his rounds. Bag full of supplies slung over his shoulder. The sun was just starting to dip behind the buildings. Katsuki was sitting in an alley with a woman, treating a burn on her arm. Her 4-year-old had just gotten her quirk and couldn't control it yet. The problem Katsuki connected with on a spiritual level. At 4 he burned himself so many times. Katsuki paused, he felt eyes on him. Without giving any indication he was aware, he handed the woman some more cream and sent her on her way. Once she was safely gone, Katsuki turned and locked glares with two figures standing in the shadows at the other end of the alley. Kitsune, the bigger of the men, chucked. The boss had been looking for you. You are difficult to pin down. Their faces weren't familiar to Katsuki, but he recognized some of the tattoos that adorned their arms. Shai Hasaikai. Your boss, huh? Well, you can tell him, he can go fuck himself with a spiked bat and then come see me. I'll make sure he is treated real good. Katsuki sneered. The two men moved forward a few steps. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw 3 more men coming in the other end of the alley. He didn't have a license to use his quirk, but that wasn't going to stop these guys, so he was just going to have to keep things small and controlled. The tension built until finally something broke and all 5 men lunged forward together. Katsuki leapt. With a bit of help from his quirk, he grabbed a fire escape high above his head. With a grin, he scaled the thing with ease so that he was on the roof. The 5 men didn't have means to follow him right away, but the additional 4 men already on a roof took this as a blessing and attacked. Katsuki ducked the first punch thrown at his face. Using his training, along with some super-powered blows he had perfected with Kenichi, he moved around trading and blocking strikes. One well-placed front ball kick sent one unlucky bastard over the edge. Katsuki hoped he could bounce. Extended limbs reached for him, along with a stream of a black tar-like substance. Looked like sludge. Fuck that, that guy did get an explosion to the face. The one with the extendable limbs. Well, he got 2 broken arms for his trouble. Katsuki grunted when a solid metal fist buried itself into his side. Spinning off the man to avoid the second, he turned sharp enough to land a spinning elbow into the temple of the next nearby man. Ducking to again avoid the swing of the man with metal fists, he swept out his leg to take the bastard down. He would have kept going, but the 4 men from earlier were making their way up, along with another half a dozen men closing in. Katsuki was never one to back down from a fight, but 14-on-1 were odds he did not like. This required a tactical retreat, with some hit-and-run techniques. Running towards the closest edge that wasn't blocked by a shit ton of men, he used a sharp blast to easily clear the gap, legs pumping methodically as soon as he hit the next roof. The men close on his heels. He sent a couple blasts over his shoulders to keep them back, but they returned the favor. A few in their numbers had projectile quirks. Several sharp spikes and small bullet-like forms whizzed past him. The open rooftops were not good for a gun, like, fight. Blindly jumping into an alleyway below was not ideal, but getting shot seemed like the lesser of the 2 options. Katsuki tucked in his limbs as he fell into the next alley. He hit the edge of a garbage bin at the bottom. The air was forcefully knocked from his lungs. Fucking hell. He muttered, forcing himself to move despite the pain. Getting caught by these fuckers was not an option. He weaved in and out of the alleys, steadily making his way north, hoping that if he got far enough into Kenichi's territory these fuckers would back off. One poor asshole jumped out at him from an linking alley. He got blasted before he could even register the dangerous palm faced his direction. Katsuki snorted at the low-level thug's expense. They really weren't smart, just dangerous. Of course he didn't think too highly of himself when a moment later took the full brunt of a shoulder tackle from a massive man in a bird mask. This one was clearly a higher-ranking gang member. Katsuki pulled himself out of the garbage pile he had been knocked into. Mask still secure, he went to move when a hand as big as his neck grabbed him and lifted him a good foot off the ground. Gasping for breath, Katsuki kicked out, but it did nothing. A few of the faster goons started to leak into the ends of the alley. He had to go. He had to get this fucker off him. A boot to the face made the man laugh. Easy now, pipsqueak. Boss want you in relatively one piece, but I will smash you if you don't stop squirming. Katsuki choked out a fuck you and kicked him again. The hand tightened, making the teen's eyes water. The man did not stand a chance when he was hit by an explosion. The same moment a dragon latched onto an arm, and a capture weapon curled around his legs. Aizawa dropped from the roofs. Kenichi appeared at the mouth of the alley, and Katsuki couldn't help but feel a little bad for the poor fuckers caught in between. Their fighting styles were not similar but were equally effective. Katsuki had expected Kenichi to be the more violent of the two, but Aizawa didn't seem to care much about what injuries he inflicted either. The goons were all still alive, to varying degrees at least. It took 1 minute and 12 seconds for 15 villains to be put down and restrained for the police to pick up. Katsuki was about to open his mouth when the alley turned cold. Kenichi and Aizawa were staring at each other. Katsuki didn't even get a word out before the capture weapon was wound him and he was flying through the air onto the roofs again. Aizawa followed him, setting him down gently. "Are you alright?" Aizawa was in front of him, carefully studying him. "Throats bruised again, a few cracked ribs when I hit a trash can." He grumbled out. The man took his chin and tilted it up. Kenichi stepped onto the roof a second later. "Cats!" He called out but froze when he met Aizawa's stare again. "No one invited you here," Aizawa snarled, his face betraying more emotion than Katsuki had ever seen there before. The man had stood to his full height, both were tense and battle-ready. "Bite me, Eraser, I am only here for Cat. I was told he was being chased." "Cat?" Aizawa looked over at Katsuki. The boy shrugged. "I've been staying with Kenichi until recently. He was friends with Suku." Aizawa looked to the sky and groaned. He might have gained a couple new gray hairs with that one. "Fucking hell, kid." Kenichi scowled but chose to walk around the man and kneeled in front of Katsuki so they were eye level. "Katsuki, I am so sorry. I was mad and concerned, but I had no right to make you feel like you owed me anything. You are always welcome at my house. Please come home, the street is just not safe for you." Aizawa stepped forward. "Actually, we need to have a talk about your living situation as well, Katsuki." He sent a glare to Kenichi before he pulled out his phone and held it up for Katsuki to see, Kenichi leaning enough to watch. It was the security video from the school. Mitsuki was hard to miss stalking across the gym. The muffled sound coming from the video was snapped when the slap could be heard clearly. Katsuki actually flinched when watching it. "Who is that?" Kenichi demanded. "I am under the impression that is your mother, right, Katsuki?" Sitting on the roof, Katsuki looked between the two men. For once their hostility towards each other was forgotten as eyes locked on him. There was really no point in answering the question. He was a spitting image of the damn hag. Instead he told a different tale, the one he had meant to tell Kenichi before their fight. The school called the fucking parents after the attack. They found a number for mine and the hag decided to show up. They were not happy with me, but decided now that I had done something somewhat notable that maybe I should be at the house a bit more. They made me go to theater agency with them on Saturday. He glanced up at the two. They own a clothing line and modeling agency and they work most weekend. He explained. The memory of gross hands on him made him shudder. They put quirk restraint bracelets on me and told me if I did anything to fuck up they'd pull me out of UA. He shuddered again. Their client has a thing for my mother, she was aware, so instead offered me to assist him for the fucking day. Katsuki, Aizawa said slowly, looking vaguely green. Did the man touch you? Katsuki shrugged. Nothing too bad I guess, but fuck, I don't like people touching me most days and he just kept rubbing my arm and lower back. Whispering in my fucking ear. He shook his head to clear the image. Anyway, I didn't blow him up, but they still weren't happy with me. Katsuki stood up, sucked in a deep breath to calm his nerves and peeled off his shirt. There was a few new bruises from the alley fight, but when he turned he heard both of the men give an angry growl. The flesh was a dark black and purple highlighted with red gashes. Fingerprints were bruised into his arms and sides. But the worst, there in the middle of his back was a word carved into his flesh. Useless. Okay, fuck this, I don't mind murdering a few people. Kenichi sneered out as his phone appeared in his hand. Give me the address, it'll look like electrical fire. Surprisingly, Aizawa said nothing to stop him. Katsuki gave a violent start. Oh, no. He held his hand out in a placating manner. They are horrible, I know that, but they are still my parents. I can't explain it, just please, don't fucking do that, you trigger-happy bastard. All right. Aizawa seemed to snap back to his senses. All right, we need evidence and do this properly. Full case, criminal charges, the works. First off, we are heading to Recovery Girl to get pictures and heal that. Is there anything else you can think of that would speed along an investigation? Katsuki ran a hand through his hair. Well, he was embarrassed to admit this, but he didn't want to go back there. In the basement, the room with the hot water heater, there are restraints bolted to the floor. Probably find more than a bit of my blood around there, that's where my dad would. He trailed off as both men were staring at him with matching horrified expressions. Yeah, and the fucking hag's phone. She likes to take pictures of the after. My way would be quicker. Kenichi commented, fingers rubbing the gun in his belt lovingly. Don't fucking tempt me with a good time, Aizawa muttered as he pulled out his phone. Okay dads. Jesus, pull in the murderous intent huh? I am supposed to be a hero in training, not an accomplice. Both men gave a start and looked at each other. Like hell I'd let this fucker raise a child with me. Kenichi sneered, pouting slightly. You shouldn't be allowed around any playground. Aizawa snapped back. Fuck you, Eraser. I've been raising our son longer than you and he is fucking amazing. Our? Aizawa rubbed the bridge of his nose. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Suku raised Katsuki more than you. He hasn't stabbed anyone yet, so definitely not your spawn. Oh, you should see this little fucking gremlin with a knife. Almost like he was born with it. Kenichi puffed out his chest in pride. He can hotwire a car in less than a minute too. Katsuki felt his face flash red as he looked over to see Aizawa glaring at him. One of his cars? Katsuki threw up his hands in surrender. I never stole anything in my life. Fuck you, Rolex, you are not fucking helping here. He sent a punch the man's way who lazily blocked before pulling Katsuki into a hug. Sorry, he muttered again. Katsuki couldn't help but forgive the asshole. I am placing you in protective custody as of right now. You are not going back to that house. Come on, we are going to Recovery Girl, Aizawa announced. Kenichi kept him tight between his arms, glaring again at Aizawa. So what, you gonna shove him in some group fucking home? He demanded. The cold aura between the two was back. What? You think him going back to a Yakuza stronghold is a better plan? He already has a rival gang trying to kill him. The tired motherfucker spared a glance to Katsuki. It is ultimately up to you though. I don't want you going anywhere you are not comfortable with. What are my options? Fuck foster care, I won't do that shit. Well, you could go with Kenichi. Aizawa looked like he might vomit at that thought. We could get him a temporary guardian status. Or, you can come back to my place and you will be under my personal care. Katsuki looked between the two. You both want me to stay with you? He was confused. What the fuck was his life with a pro hero and a Yakuza boss fighting over his custody? Can I do both? Stay with Kenichi on weekdays so I can do my round. Both men went to speak. I won't stop helping the people because of these fuckwads. I have my phone and the tracker you gave me, so I'll be fine. You put a fucking tracker on him? Kenichi looked surprised. Aizawa gave him an unimpressed look. Sorry you didn't think of that first? Fuck you. Out of your class, I'm afraid. Aizawa remained stoic, but the comment made Katsuki bark out a laugh regardless. Anyway, you old fucking married couple, going with you on weekends also avoids the extras in class thinking I'm getting special treatment. Shared custody. Rolex slumped over Katsuki's shoulder. When did we ever let our relationship get to this, Eraser? I was content in just trying to beat you up. And I was content in ruining all your illegal operations. I don't know what you are talking about. I am a serious businessman. Aizawa looked about 2 seconds away from snapping the mouthy fucker's neck. Really, Katsuki couldn't blame him. He dealt with enough sassy teenagers on a daily basis. I am only agreeing to this because I, for one, thinks Katsuki needs an army protecting him with his shit luck, and two, I can trust that he at least would not partake in any unsavory behavior. The man around his shoulders hums. He does have an unwavering moral compass. But if you ever want to partake in some unsavory behavior, I wouldn't say no. The fucker was flirting with his teacher. How do you go from looks that could kill to trying to get into their fucking bed? Okay, you thirsty asshole. Katsuki pushed the man away, towards the route to take him home. I'm going to go get patched up. I'll see you at the house. The man cackled like a madman as he sauntered away. Aizawa was trying to summon some sort of divine power to strike the fucker down as he went.